Every detail in this story comes from the historical record. Tonight, you are stepping aboard the largest ship ever built. It is the morning of Wednesday, the 10th of April, 1912. The ship is the RMS Titanic, Royal Mail Ship, a designation given to vessels under contract to carry the King's Post across the Atlantic, and you are about to board her. If you enjoy this, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and turning on notifications. This channel is still new, and it means more than you know. Just relax and feel free to let this play as you drift off to sleep. Now, let us begin. Your name is Lawrence Beesley. You are 34 years old. You were born in Wirksworth, Derbyshire, in the English Midlands, on the last day of 1877. Until very recently, you were a science master at Dulwich College in South London, one of the country's finest independent schools, where you taught natural science to boys whose fathers were barristers, doctors, and members of Parliament. You are educated at Cambridge. You took a first-class degree in the natural science tripos in 1903. You know how things work. You know how to observe carefully, record precisely, and reason without panic. You have resigned your post, not because anything went wrong, but because you needed time away from England. Your first wife, Gertrude, Sissy, you always called her, died 6 years ago of a respiratory illness. She was 27. Your son, Alec, is 8 years old and is being cared for while you travel. You are going to America for an extended holiday, and from there north to Toronto, where your brother lives. It is the kind of journey a man takes when he needs to breathe again. You have paid £13 for your second-class ticket. Ticket number 248698. Your cabin is D56 on D deck on the starboard side of the ship. £13. That is roughly 3 weeks of a skilled craftsman's wages in England in 1912. It is not a small sum, but it is not the world either. Second class on the Titanic is not a compromise. It is a choice made by people who are doing well. Teachers, clergymen, minor professionals, small businessmen, people who live with some comfort but have not yet crossed into the territory where money stops being counted. The upper class, 5% of Britain, do not count money. The middle class, 15%, count it carefully. You are middle class in the truest sense of the word. Educated, employed, respectable, and aware at every moment of the precise distance between what you have and what others have above and below you. This is England in 1912. It is the last full year of the Edwardian era, though no one knows that yet. King Edward VII died 2 years ago in 1910, and his son George V now sits on the throne. The empire is at its greatest extent, covering nearly a quarter of the Earth's land surface, governing 400 million people across 6 continents. British ships carry a third of the world's ocean trade. The nation believes, without much examination, that it sits at the center of human civilization. And yet, below the surface of that confidence, things are moving. The national coal strike has only just ended. In the first days of April, workers have been striking across Britain. Miners, transport workers, dockers, in what newspapers are calling the Great Unrest. Trade union membership is climbing. The suffragette movement is disrupting Parliament, chaining women to railings, breaking windows, demanding the vote. Something is shifting in the structure of British society, and the people at the top of that structure feel it, even if they cannot name it precisely. You feel none of this urgency this morning. You are on holiday. The boat train from London Waterloo arrives at Southampton Terminus railway station at 9:30 in the morning, and the station is on the quayside alongside the ship's berth. You do not have to walk far from the platform to find her. You see her before anything else registers clearly. She is simply too large for the eye to take in at once. The Titanic is 882 feet long. She is 175 feet from her keel to the top of her funnels. She displaces 46,328 tons. She is the largest movable object human beings have ever built. Standing next to her, you feel the particular disorientation of standing next to something that your mind knows is man-made, but your body cannot process as such. She looks like a building that has been placed sideways on the water. She looks like a cliff face that someone has installed portholes in. Her 4 funnels are cream-colored and black at the tops, and they rise into the pale April sky. 3 of them are functional. The 4th, at the stern, is decorative, added by the designers because the ship looked more powerful with 4 funnels than 3, and the traveling public associated more funnels with more speed and more safety. The 4th funnel serves the kitchens and provides ventilation to certain lower decks. It is a beautiful lie. You pick up your bag and join the second-class boarding queue. Third-class passengers are already on board. They were the first to embark, and before they were allowed onto the gangway, they were examined by a doctor on the dock for any sign of trachoma, an eye disease that causes blindness and that American immigration authorities refuse entry to those who carry it. A man was turned away this morning. He had come a long way. He did not get on board. Over half the third-class passengers do not speak English as their first language. They are emigrants, mostly from Ireland, from Scandinavia, from Lebanon, from Eastern Europe, crossing the Atlantic in search of something they cannot find at home. Between 1901 and 1910, 11 million people emigrated to America. The Titanic is carrying some of them. You are not one of them. You are going for a holiday. The passengers board through separate class entrances. This is not cruelty. This is just the way the world is organized in 1912. Class is not primarily about wealth in England. It is about breeding, education, manner, occupation. Money can help you move from one class to another, but it takes a generation or 2 before the new class accepts you fully. You speak in a certain way. You carry yourself in a certain way. You attended Cambridge. These things mark you as clearly as a uniform. You walk through the second-class entrance and follow the passageway down to D-deck. Your cabin, D56, is a 2-berth room. You have it to yourself. The walls are paneled in white-painted steel. There is a washstand, a writing desk, a wardrobe. The berths are fitted with proper mattresses, not the straw-filled pallets that cross-Atlantic passengers endured a generation ago. There is a porthole. Through it, you can see the dockside receding as your eyes adjust to the dimensions of the room. You set your bag down and sit on the edge of the berth. The ship does not feel like it is going anywhere yet. It feels entirely still. The engines are running somewhere far below. You can feel them as a very faint vibration in the metal frame beneath you, like a heartbeat in a very large body. But there is no sense of movement, no sense of urgency. You sit in the quiet and listen to the sound of other passengers settling into their cabins along the corridor. This ship was not built quickly or cheaply. She was constructed at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast at a cost of approximately £1.5 million. the equivalent at current rates of somewhere near £150 million in today's money. She took 26 months to build. At the height of construction, 3,000 men worked on her simultaneously. Before she was finished, 6 of them died, killed in accidents on the scaffolding, in the machinery, in the dangerous work of bending steel at scale. Their names were not printed in the newspapers alongside the launch announcements. The Titanic exists because of a competition. In 1907, J. Bruce Ismay, the managing director of the White Star Line, and Lord Peary, chairman of Harland and Wolff, met at a dinner party in London. Cunard Line, White Star's great rival, had just launched the Lusitania and the Mauretania, the fastest Atlantic liners in the world. Cunard had beaten them on speed. Ismay and Peary decided they would not compete on speed. They would compete on size and luxury. They would build ships so large and so fine that speed would seem beside the point. The result was the Olympic class, 3 ships, Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic, to be built in sequence. The Olympic entered service in June of 1911. The Titanic is her maiden voyage, this April of 1912. The Britannic is not yet finished. White Star does not chase the blue riband, the prize for the fastest Atlantic crossing. Cunard's Mauretania holds it, and she has held it since 1907, crossing the Atlantic in 4 days and 10 hours. The Titanic is not built for that kind of speed. She is built for something else. She is built for the experience of the crossing itself, for the sensation of traveling in such comfort that the ocean feels like a minor inconvenience rather than an obstacle. You will feel this in your cabin. You will feel it in the dining saloon. Just before noon, you feel the very first movement. It is not dramatic. It is a barely perceptible shifting of weight, a slight change in the quality of the stillness. Far below, 6 tugs are maneuvering the Titanic out of berth 44, pulling and pushing her enormous hull sideways into the river Test. You go up to the deck. The crowd on the dock is enormous. Thousands of people line the quayside, families of the crew, curious Southamptonians, journalists, dock workers who have paused in their labor to watch. When the ship's triple-toned whistles sound, the noise is immense, and the crowd replies with cheering that you can hear even over the machinery. The Titanic begins to move. And then something happens that no one expected. As the ship's 3 massive propellers begin to churn the water, the displacement they create, the enormous wash of a 46,000-ton hull moving through a confined channel, causes a suction in the water around the nearby vessels. The USMS New York, a smaller steamship moored ahead along the ship's path, begins to swing outward. Her mooring ropes, thick steel hawsers, snap one by one with sounds like cannon fire. 6 of them break in sequence. The New York, free and unpowered, swings toward the Titanic's stern with her hull broadside. You watch this from the deck. You watch the gap between the 2 ships narrow to approximately 4 feet before a tug manages to get a line on the New York and drag her back. 4 feet, the breadth of a doorway. If the tug had been 30 seconds slower, the Titanic's maiden voyage would have ended before she left the harbor. The delay costs an hour. Departure, originally noon, is pushed to 1 o'clock. You stand on deck and watch Southampton's waterfront recede, and the crowd on the dock grows smaller, and then the docks themselves become a dark line against the Hampshire shore, and then there is only the gray-green water of Southampton Water, and then the Solent, and then the open English Channel. The ship accelerates. You feel it not as acceleration exactly, but as a deepening of the vibration beneath your feet, a thickening of the mechanical pulse that has been present since you boarded. The Titanic is powered by two four-cylinder reciprocating steam engines, each driving one of the outer propellers, and one low-pressure Parsons turbine driving the central propeller. The combined output is approximately 51,000 shaft horsepower. This machinery occupies the lowest decks of the ship in a space the size of a cathedral. 269 furnaces consume 825 tons of coal per day at full speed, shoveled by hand by a team of firemen and trimmers working 4-hour shifts around the clock in the temperature of a forge. You do not see any of this. You feel only the smooth, quiet forward motion of the ship, which is at this moment traveling at approximately 18 knots, roughly 21 miles per hour. The vibration through the deck is faint. The bow cuts the channel water without visible drama. It is, above all else, comfortable. You go back to your cabin and unpack properly. The first-class accommodation up on B and C decks has private promenade decks, a gymnasium with mechanical horses and stationary bicycles, a Turkish bath, a squash court, a swimming pool, and a café parisien decorated to resemble a Parisian sidewalk, completely enclosed behind glass. The suites on B deck cost up to £870 in high season. That is more than 14 times what you paid for your entire ticket. You do not have access to any of this. What you have is the second-class library on C deck, a comfortable paneled room with bookshelves and writing tables, where you can borrow a book from the ship's collection and spend the afternoon reading. You have the enclosed second-class promenade on B deck, where the salt air comes through the glass and you can watch the white wake behind the ship. You have the second-class smoking room for the men and the second-class dining saloon on D deck, which is in truth considerably finer than the first-class dining rooms of most other ships currently sailing the Atlantic. That comparison is not an accident. White Star built their second and third-class accommodation on the Titanic to standards that would have been considered first-class on their competitors' ships from 10 years ago. They understood that the emigrant and middle-class market was as important as the wealthy market, perhaps more so since there were far more people in it. Between 1907 and 1912, the competition between shipping lines became so fierce that an emigrant could book third-class passage to America for as little as $10. Third class on the Titanic is the most comfortable steerage accommodation on the Atlantic. You find the library and select a book. You are by nature a careful observer. You will record details later, in notes made during the voyage, which will eventually become a book, published only 9 weeks after this voyage ends. You notice things. You note the quality of the wooden paneling. You note the light through the portholes. You note the way the ship moves, the slight, slow, rolling motion beneath the stillness, which tells an attentive body that the floor it stands on is floating. You are not afraid of the sea. You have no particular reason to be afraid of this ship. By early afternoon, the coast of France is visible on the port side. Cherbourg sits in a sheltered bay on the Normandy coast, and the Titanic, too large to enter the harbor, anchors 2 miles offshore. 2 small tenders, the Nomadic and the Traffic, ferry passengers out to her. 22 passengers who boarded at Southampton disembark here, having used the Titanic as a cross-channel ferry. And then 274 new passengers come aboard, Americans returning home from Europe, French citizens emigrating, and among them a selection of the very wealthy, people who have been wintering in the south of France, people who have been in Paris, people who carry first-class luggage that fills the tenders with leather and lacquered wood. The tender also delivers mail, 1,385 bags of it. The Titanic carries the Royal Mail designation, RMS, Royal Mail Ship, which means she is under contract to deliver the post reliably and on schedule. There is a mail room on the orlop deck below the waterline, where 5 postal workers sort the bags. They are there now, handling the new Cherbourg delivery. They will be among the first to know, in 4 days' time, that something is wrong. By 8:10 in the evening, Cherbourg recedes into the eastern darkness, and the Titanic turns her bow toward the Irish Sea. The dining saloon is called for dinner. In second class, there is no bugle call. In first class, a bugler walks the corridors playing the roast beef of Old England, 30 minutes before each meal, an announcement so theatrical it is almost a parody of itself. You hear about it later. In second class, the steward simply knocks and informs you that dinner is served. The second-class dining saloon is on D-deck, aft, toward the stern of the ship. It is 70 feet long and can accommodate 394 passengers in a single sitting. The walls are paneled in oak. The floor is linoleum in a warm brown tone. The tables are rectangular and long, arranged in parallel rows. The chairs are mahogany swivel chairs, upholstered in red leather, bolted to the floor against the motion of the sea. At the forward end of the room, against the wall, stands an upright Steinway piano that will be used for the Sunday church service in 2 days' time. You are seated at one of the long tables. Around you are people you have never met, clergymen, commercial travelers, a professor, a family from the north of England, a young couple who appear to be emigrating. In first class, the seating is arranged by request, in small, intimate groups, and the food is served from printed menus changed daily. In second class, you sit where you are placed, alongside people of roughly your social station, and you eat what is brought to you. What is brought to you tonight is substantial. The second-class kitchen shares the galley with first class. The food is nearly as good. Tonight, the menu includes consommé, baked haddock in a sharp sauce, curried chicken and rice, spring lamb with mint sauce, roast turkey with cranberry sauce, and for dessert, plum pudding, wine jelly, coconut sandwich biscuits, American ice cream, assorted nuts, fresh fruit, and cheese. There is no printed menu. There are no waiters asking for your preference. The food appears in sequence, bowl by bowl, dish by dish, carried from the kitchen by hand, a detail that surprises you slightly, since the ship was advertised as the most modern in the world. And the second-class dining saloon on the Olympic has serving trays, but the Titanic's fitting out was rushed in its final weeks, and certain things were not finished. The waiters carry everything by hand. You eat and listen. The table conversation turns immediately to the ship. Everyone at the table wants to talk about the ship. A man opposite you, who gives his name as an engineer from Manchester, says he walked every public deck twice before dinner and found the second-class facilities superior to the first class on the Cunarders he has traveled on before. A woman beside him agrees. A clergyman at the end of the table says he has heard the ship is practically unsinkable, owing to the watertight compartment design. You listen to this statement with the particular attention of a science teacher. You know something about the watertight compartment design. The Titanic has 16 watertight compartments, separated by bulkheads that run across the width of the ship. These bulkheads can be sealed remotely from the bridge with a single switch, closing electrical watertight doors throughout the ship in under 30 seconds. The ship is designed to float with any 2 of the 16 compartments flooded. She can even float with the first 4 compartments flooded simultaneously. This is genuinely impressive engineering. It is the basis of the claim that she is unsinkable, or practically so. The claim did not originate with the White Star Line. It appeared first in a trade publication called The Shipbuilder, which described the compartment system and concluded that the ship was practically unsinkable. The phrase was picked up by newspapers, simplified, popularized, and by April 1912 it has become a kind of received wisdom, something people say at dinner tables, with the comfortable confidence of people repeating a thing they heard from someone who read it somewhere. You do not say anything about this at dinner. You eat your plum pudding and listen to the clergyman explain the watertight doors, and you think about what you know, and you do not say anything. After dinner, you return to the library. The library is quieter now. A few people are writing letters. The ship passes a tender service point before leaving Irish waters tomorrow, and anything posted before then will reach England within a day or 2. A man at the far table is composing something in pencil with great care. A woman is reading with her shoes removed, her feet resting on the rung of the chair below her. The lamp light is warm and steady. The floor moves very slightly beneath you, the long, slow roll of a ship in moderate channel swell. You select a book and sit down. Outside the portholes, the English Channel is dark. The lights of the French coast are gone. The sky is clear, and the stars are very bright, clearer than they ever appear over London, where the gas lamps and coal fires blur everything above the rooftops. Out here, the sky goes all the way down to the horizon in every direction. You read for a while. At some point, the library empties around you, and you are alone in the lamplight with your book and the faint mechanical pulse of the engines. The ship is doing 21 knots now, heading southwest into the open Atlantic Passage. Somewhere below the waterline, the firemen are shoveling coal in 4-hour shifts, feeding 269 furnaces, maintaining the steam pressure that keeps the massive pistons moving in their cylinders. Somewhere above you, on the bridge, Captain Edward John Smith is standing his watch, a man who has been sailing the Atlantic for the White Star Line since 1887, who is 62 years old and was due to retire after this voyage. He is considered the most experienced and trusted commander in the fleet. This is to be his final crossing before retirement. You know none of this tonight. You know only the library, and the book, and the light. You go to your cabin at 11 o'clock. You undress, wash at the basin, and get into the berth. The sheet is clean and stiff with laundry starch. The pillow is firm. The porthole is dark, showing only the reflection of the small lamp you leave burning on the writing desk. The ship moves beneath you, not violently, not even perceptibly really. It is more like lying in a very large room that happens to be resting on something that breathes. The engines are a presence rather than a sound. The floor is solid and slightly warm through the mattress. You have read about this. The smoothness of large ships in moderate seas is one of their advertised virtues, particularly among the White Star Line's promotional materials, which describe the Atlantic crossing on their Olympic-class ships as more like a summer's day on a very large lake than an ocean passage. You thought this was advertising language. Now you are not sure. The ship is genuinely still. Outside, the English Channel gives way to the western approaches. By morning you will be off the Irish coast, making for the port of Queenstown, where the last passengers will board before the open ocean begins. The lamp burns quietly on the desk. You pull the sheet up. The berth is narrow but not uncomfortable. You have slept in worse places. Dormitory rooms at Cambridge, cold lodgings in London when you were first teaching. This is better than both of those. The engines run, the ship runs. Somewhere in the Atlantic, several days away, the city of New York is going about its night, completely unaware that you are crossing toward it. You close your eyes. The darkness behind them is very gentle. The motion beneath you is very slow. The sound of the engines is a hum at the lower edge of hearing. You are asleep within a few minutes. You wake before 7. The light through the porthole is pale and gray, the particular flat light of early morning over open water, with no land to interrupt the horizon and no buildings to cast shadows. You lie still for a moment in the berth, listening. The engines are the first thing you register. They are not loud. They are a continuous, low, even vibration. Less a sound than a physical fact, a presence in the hull beneath you and in the air around you. You have been aware of them all night, the way you are aware of your own heartbeat when you lie very still in a quiet room, not consciously, but constantly. The second thing you register is the motion. The Titanic is rolling very slightly, a long, slow, side-to-side movement, perhaps 2 or 3 degrees in each direction, taking several seconds to complete. This is the Irish Sea. She entered it sometime in the night, after clearing the western tip of the English Channel, and the sea here is shorter and slightly more active than the deeper Atlantic water to come. The motion is almost pleasant. It is the motion of a very large cradle. You sit up, wash at the basin, and dress. The cabin is colder than the previous evening. The heating system, the Titanic has a central heating system, which at the time is still a novelty on ocean-going vessels, has not yet brought the corridor temperatures up to their daytime level. You pull on your wool jacket before going out. In the corridor, a steward is already moving with quiet efficiency, carrying linens. He nods as you pass. The stewards on the Titanic's second class are white-jacketed men employed by the White Star Line at fixed wages, between £2 and £4 per month, plus the tips that make up a significant portion of their real income. There are roughly 23 bedroom stewards assigned to second class, serving the cabin passengers on E and F decks, plus D deck where your cabin is. A bedroom steward typically looks after approximately 20 passengers, makes the beds, empties the basins, brings hot water, delivers messages, answers questions about the ship. You ask him what time the ship arrives at Queenstown. He says approximately 11:30 in the morning. You thank him and go up to the second-class promenade. The morning air is cold and damp, with the particular freshness of sea air before the day has warmed it, salt and iodine and something clean that you cannot name precisely, only recognize. The coast of Ireland is somewhere to the north, invisible from the promenade but known to be there. The sky is overcast, the cloud cover uniform and pale. The water is dark green at close range and almost black farther out. You stand at the rail and look aft, toward the ship's stern and her wake. The Titanic's wake is extraordinary. It extends behind her in a long white road, perfectly straight, marked with the churning of her 3 propellers. The central propeller is a Parsons steam turbine, the first of its type to be fitted to a ship of this class, and it drives the central shaft at higher rotations per minute than the outer screws. The result is a wake with a slightly different texture in its center than at its edges, which you notice because you were a science teacher and you notice things like this. The turbine was originally designed for smaller, faster vessels. On the Titanic, it processes the exhaust steam from the two main reciprocating engines, making use of steam that would otherwise be wasted. It is an efficient system. It is not a fast one. The Titanic is not the fastest ship in the world. The Mauritania, Cunard's record holder, can sustain 25 to 26 knots. The Titanic's service speed is 21 to 22 knots. She was not built to be fast. She was built to be large and reliable and comfortable, to offer the feeling that crossing the Atlantic was an experience worth having in itself, not merely an ordeal to be survived in as little time as possible. This distinction matters in 1912 because the ocean crossing is genuinely difficult for most people on board. For the 373 people in third class, the journey will take approximately 5 to 7 days after leaving Queenstown, much of it spent in the lower decks of the ship in close quarters with strangers, eating communal meals in a dining room on F deck, with limited access to fresh air. The Atlantic in April is cold. The sea, even on a calm voyage, produces nausea in those not accustomed to it. The noise from the engines and the propellers is considerably louder on the lower decks. The smell of coal smoke is present throughout the ship, stronger the lower you go. For the passengers in second class, the journey is manageable. For those in first class, it is a recreation. You go down to the dining saloon for breakfast. The second-class breakfast on the 11th of April 1912 is not a sparse meal. You are presented with fresh fruit, rolled oats, boiled hominy, a coarsely ground corn porridge popular in American cooking, fresh fish, kippers, grilled ox kidneys and bacon, American dry hash au gratin, grilled sausage, mashed potatoes, grilled ham and fried eggs, fried potatoes. There are Vienna rolls, Graham rolls, soda scones, buckwheat cakes with maple syrup. There is jam, marmalade, coffee, and tea. You eat more than you would eat at home, where your breakfast in the lodgings near Dulwich College was usually toast and a boiled egg. The scale of the provision is slightly disorienting. The White Star Line spends approximately 3 shillings and 6 pence per day on food for each second-class passenger, roughly equivalent to a working man's daily wage. The company calculated that well-fed passengers complained less, required less attention from the crew, and were more likely to travel again on White Star ships. It was not generosity. It was management. After breakfast, you return to the upper deck. The coastline of Ireland is now visible to the northwest, the dark green hills of County Cork, low on the horizon. The air has warmed slightly as the cloud cover thinned, and there is a pale sun above the overcast. Other passengers have come up onto the promenade, standing in small groups, watching the coast. Many of them are on their way to America for the first time. For these passengers, and particularly for the Irish emigrants in third class, many of whom are leaving for good, this view of the Irish hills is not a picturesque backdrop. It is the last sight of home they may ever have. Ireland in 1912 is not at peace. It is the year of the Third Home Rule Bill, the latest attempt in decades of political agitation to give Ireland a parliament in Dublin, separate from Westminster. The bill is passing through Parliament now, supported by the Liberal government of Herbert Asquith. bitterly opposed by the Ulster Unionists in the north of the island, who consider themselves British and have no desire to be governed from Catholic Dublin. The County Cork that you can see from the ship's rail is nationalist country, the part of Ireland that wants home rule, that has been wanting it since the 1880s, that has been sending emigrant ships of young men and women to America every year for 7 decades. Between 1845 and 1852, the Great Famine killed approximately 1 million people in Ireland and caused the emigration of another million in a single decade. By 1912, the Irish diaspora in America numbers in the millions, and many of the people in the Titanic's third-class accommodation are following relatives who have gone before them, going to join communities in Boston and New York and Philadelphia that have been accumulating since the famine ships. You do not know most of this in any personal way. You are English, Cambridge educated, traveling for a holiday, but you observe the people around you. There is a man in third class who has been permitted briefly into the second class area to speak with his wife through the gate that divides the class accommodations. You see this from the promenade. The two of them are standing on opposite sides of a locked gate, speaking through the bars in low voices. She in second class, he in third. Presumably she has the better ticket for a reason you do not know. They are speaking with evident affection. He reaches his hand through the bars, and she takes it. The gate is not symbolic. It is a physical barrier. It is, in the language of 1912, simply the correct arrangement of things. By 11:30, the Titanic drops anchor approximately 2 miles offshore from Queenstown, now known as Cove, on the southern Irish coast. The harbor is too shallow for a ship of her draft to enter safely. 2 small tenders, the PS Ireland and the PS America, make the trip from the Heartbreak jetty to the ship, carrying passengers and mail. You watch the tenders approach from the deck rail. 7 second-class passengers board at Queenstown, and 113 in third class. Among the new arrivals are families bringing everything they own in cloth bundles and battered cases, young women traveling alone to join relatives, young men with no English and everything they have in the world in a single bag. They come up the gangway in a line, blinking in the thin Irish sun, and are directed below. 1,385 bags of mail follow them. You hear the mail described this way later. That figure, 1,385 bags, as if the mail is a kind of cargo that defines the crossing. In a sense it does. The Titanic carries the post under her Royal Mail Ship designation, and that contract obligates her to maintain schedule. It is one reason the Titanic is unlikely to slow significantly in the North Atlantic. Being late with the mail is a breach of contract. 7 passengers also leave the ship at Queenstown. They have booked passage from Southampton to Cork, the Titanic as a ferry, nothing more. Francis Brown is among those who disembark at Queenstown. He is a Jesuit scholastic, a student priest who has spent 2 days aboard on a first-class ticket, a gift from his uncle. He has a camera. Over the 2 days of the voyage from Southampton to Queenstown, he has taken photographs of the ship, the passengers, the crew, the decks. He has photographed things no one else thought to photograph: the gymnasium equipment, the first-class staircase, a child playing on the boat deck. He is ordered off at Queenstown by his religious superior in Dublin, who has received a telegram from him asking permission to continue to New York. The telegram came back: "Get off that ship." He takes his camera and gets off the ship. The photographs Francis Brown took in those 2 days are now among the most important visual records of the Titanic that exist. Everything he photographed, the ship, the interiors, the faces of people on deck, is gone within 4 days of him stepping onto the Queenstown tender. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the Titanic raises her anchor. You feel it rather than hear it, a change in the quality of the vibration beneath your feet as the machinery engages, a deepening of the engine sound. The ship begins to move west, and the coast of Ireland begins to slide behind the stern, and then there is only the open Atlantic ahead of you. You watch the Irish hills until they become a low, dark line, and then until they become a shadow, and then until the horizon is empty in every direction. The last time most people on this ship will see land. You do not know this. You go back to the library. The Atlantic crossing in April 1912 is, by the standards of 1912, a modern achievement. Human beings first crossed the Atlantic in steam-powered vessels only in 1819, and even then the crossing took 29 days and required sail assistance for most of the voyage. By 1907, the Mauretania could cross in 4 days and 10 hours. The Titanic, on her current schedule, is expected to arrive in New York on the morning of Wednesday, the 17th of April, 7 days after leaving Southampton, 5.5 days after leaving Queenstown. The distance from Queenstown to New York is approximately 2,800 miles. The Titanic is traveling west at 21 knots, which means she covers approximately 500 miles of open ocean in each 24-hour period. At this pace, she will pass south of the Grand Banks of Newfoundland on Sunday night or early Monday morning. You do not think about any of this. You think about your book. The second-class library is well stocked for a ship's library. The collection includes novels, histories, travel writing, and a selection of scientific texts, the latter placed there partly because the demographics of second-class travel include a disproportionate number of teachers, clergymen, and educated professionals. You are reading a history of the Levant, which you picked up yesterday and have been working through steadily. It is a comfortable book, not challenging, but interesting enough to fill the afternoon pleasantly. Around 2 o'clock, you go out to the promenade and find a deck chair. The White Star Line charges a small fee, 6 pence a day, for the use of a deck chair. You pay this without much thought. 6 pence is not a significant expenditure for a man of your income. You settle into the chair with your book, and the North Atlantic air washes over you, and the ship cuts steadily westward. The Atlantic in April is not warm. The air temperature is somewhere around 7 or 8 degrees Celsius, cold enough for a coat and wool gloves, cold enough that you can see your breath in the shade of the funnels, but in the sun, such as it is, and out of the wind, the temperature on the promenade deck is almost pleasant. Several other passengers are in deck chairs near you, an elderly couple, a woman reading with a woolen rug over her knees, a young man asleep with his hat over his face. The ship's wake trails behind you, white and churning and absolutely straight. You read for an hour. In the afternoon, you walk the ship. Second class on the Titanic occupies the middle section of the vessel, amidships and toward the stern. On D, E, F, and G decks, you have access to the second-class promenades, the library, the smoking room on B deck, and the dining saloon on D deck. The aft end of the boat deck, the highest deck, is also open to second-class passengers. You do not have access to the first-class areas, which occupy the forward and central sections of the ship. You know they are there because you can see them. the glass-enclosed promenade on a deck, the ornate boat deck housing with its carved wooden surrounds, the white painted superstructure above B deck. You pass the gates that divide the class spaces without particular resentment. This is simply how ships are arranged. This is how the world is arranged. Third class is farther aft than you and also forward in the bow section, and they have even less freedom of movement than you do. Their promenade space is smaller, their public rooms are simpler. Steel painted white, some pine paneling, freestanding chairs. They are comfortable by any honest standard of comparison. The Titanic's third-class cabins are private, with 2 to 10 berths, and the food is better than many of these passengers eat at home. But they are not second class, and they are not first class, and the 3 classes are separated by locked gates and guarded passageways. The gate between second and third class is the gate you saw this morning, the one where the man spoke to his wife. You pass it again in the afternoon on your walk. He is not there. The gate is locked. You go to the boat deck. The boat deck is the topmost deck of the ship, running the entire length of the superstructure. Up here, the Titanic's lifeboats are stored in their davits, the mechanical cranes from which they are lowered into the sea in an emergency. You count them. There are 16 standard wooden lifeboats, arranged in 4 sets of 4 on either side of the ship, and 4 collapsible canvas boats stored on the deck itself. 20 boats in total. They are mounted in Welin quadrant davits, a modern design that allows 2 boats to be launched from each set of davits, one mounted outboard in the traditional position, one stored inboard that can be moved into the davit once the first has been launched. This sounds sufficient until you do the arithmetic. The 16 standard lifeboats have a capacity of approximately 65 persons each. The 4 collapsibles hold approximately 47 persons each. Total capacity, approximately 1,178 persons. The Titanic currently carries 2,208 people on board, passengers and crew combined. The lifeboats can carry roughly half of them. You know this. Most people on the ship know this, or could work it out in a few minutes. It is not a secret. In 1912, British maritime law requires ships to carry lifeboats based on a formula calculated from gross tonnage that was written in 1894 and has not been updated since. Under that formula, the Titanic is required to carry a minimum of 16 lifeboats. She carries 20. She is technically in excess of legal requirements. The Board of Trade surveyor, who inspected and certified the ship before departure, reviewed the lifeboat provision and signed off on it. The law was satisfied. The question of whether 16 or 20 or 48 lifeboats would have been more appropriate for a ship carrying 2,200 people was not a question the law required anyone to ask. You look at the boats in their davits for a moment. You are a scientist. You have done the arithmetic. You think about the arithmetic and then you stop thinking about it and go back down to the library. This is not unusual behavior. Almost everyone on board has done or could do this calculation, and almost everyone has stopped thinking about it in approximately the same way. The ship is the Titanic. She is the most modern vessel afloat. She has the watertight compartment system. She has the most experienced captain in the White Star Fleet. The North Atlantic crossing is made hundreds of times a year by dozens of ships without incident. The lifeboats are there. They are visible. They are maintained. They are simply not thought about very much by the people who are not paid to think about them. You read until dinner. Dinner is again substantial. The second-class dinner menu for the 11th of April is served in the same long dining saloon, with the same bolted swivel chairs, the same starched white tablecloths, the same attentive stewards carrying everything by hand. Your table companions from the previous night are mostly the same people. The engineer from Manchester, the clergyman, a woman traveling alone to meet her husband in New York, who works in the garment trade in Lower Manhattan. The conversation tonight turns to America. This is invariably where the conversation goes on Atlantic crossings in 1912. America is the subject, America as destination, America as idea, America as alternative to whatever England or Ireland or wherever else has failed to provide. The woman whose husband is in the garment trade says he came over in 1905 and has done well. The engineer says he has cousins in Boston who have been urging him to come for years. The clergyman says he is attending a conference in New York and has never been. America is absorbing approximately 1 million immigrants per year in 1912. They come from Southern and Eastern Europe primarily, from Italy, from Poland, from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, from the Russian Empire where Jews are subject to pogroms and young men are subject to military conscription for 25 years. They come from Ireland and from Scotland and from England. They come to New York, where they are processed through Ellis Island, the immigration station in New York Harbor that has been operating since 1892, through which 12 million people will eventually pass between its opening and 1954. They come to take work in the factories, the construction sites, the garment districts, the mines. They come because America does not have a class system in the English sense, or so the story goes. The story is not entirely accurate, but it is powerful enough to move millions of people across an ocean. You are not emigrating. You are on holiday. But you listen to the conversations around you with the attention you always bring to observation, and you note that the people at your table talk about America the way people talk about a place that has power over them, the way you might talk about a doctor, or a creditor, or a god. After dinner, you walk to the stern of the ship. The stern promenade in second class is open to the sky, with a wooden rail and the Atlantic spreading out behind the ship in both directions as far as you can see in the darkness. The stars are very clear tonight, clearer than they were last night in the Channel, because the ship is now far enough from any coast that there is no ambient light anywhere. The Milky Way is visible, a faint smear across the south. The Southern Cross is not this far north, but you can see Orion on the western horizon and the full sweep of the winter constellations before they set. The wake behind the ship catches the starlight. It is white against the black water, absolutely straight, extending to the limit of visibility and then disappearing into the dark. The air is cold. You can feel it on the back of your hands and on your face, but your coat keeps the rest of you warm enough. A few other passengers are standing at the rail, a young couple standing close together, not speaking, watching the wake, an older man smoking a pipe, his collar turned up. You stand apart from them and look at the stars and the water. The Titanic is now approximately 200 miles west of the Irish coast, sailing at 21 knots on a heading that will take her south of Newfoundland and then down the eastern American seaboard toward New York. She is carrying the mail and the emigrants and the wealthy and the teacher on holiday and all their luggage and the 5 postal workers in the mail room below the waterline and Captain Smith on the bridge and the firemen in the boiler rooms shoveling coal and the stewards folding towels, and the wireless operators in the Marconi room sending and receiving messages. The wireless room on the Titanic is operated by Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, employed not by White Star but by the Marconi Company, which leases the equipment and the operators to the shipping line. They send private passenger messages, telegrams from wealthy passengers to their families, business communications, social notes, and they relay official weather and navigation information between ships. The wireless has a range in these early days of approximately 400 miles in daylight, more at night when the signal travels farther without atmospheric interference. The Titanic's equipment is more powerful than most ships of her class, able to send and receive over greater distances. The wireless is a new technology in 1912. Guglielmo Marconi sent the first transatlantic wireless signal in 1901, just 11 years ago. The idea that ships at sea could communicate with each other and with shore stations in real time is so recent that the protocols governing its use are still being worked out. There is no international agreement yet on which frequencies to monitor, which distress signals to use, how to prioritize different kinds of messages. The operators on many ships switch off their receivers at night to sleep. Some ships do not have wireless at all. You do not think about the wireless tonight. You think about nothing in particular. You stand at the stern rail and look at the stars and the water and the wake, and the cold air on your hands tells you simply that you are outside and alive and far from London, and that this is enough. You go inside after a while. Back in the library, the room is quieter now. Two people are playing cards at a corner table. A woman is writing letters by the lamp, pressing hard with her pen as the ship moves. You sit and open your book, but you find you are not really reading. You are only looking at the words while your eyes rest. By 10 o'clock, you go down to your cabin. You wash and undress and get into the berth. The ship is moving smoothly, smoother than last night, now that you are in the open Atlantic and the Irish Sea's shorter chop has been left behind. The ocean here is deep and wide, and the waves are long. The long, slow swells of the mid-Atlantic that roll in from thousands of miles away and pass beneath the hull with a movement that is less rocking than breathing. The engines run. They are always running. They are the constant underneath everything. Tomorrow is Friday. The ship will have been at sea for 2 full days. You will wake to the same gray Atlantic light, the same salt air, the same dining saloon, the same library, for the next 3 days until New York. This is your world. 650 feet of steel and wood and brass fittings on 46,000 tons of hull, crossing a 2,000-mile ocean at 21 knots under the command of a man who has been doing this for 25 years. You close your eyes. The ocean rolls beneath you. It has been rolling for 46 million years before this ship, and will roll long after she is gone. You do not think this tonight. You only feel it, the slow, immense, patient motion of the water beneath the hull. The lamp on the desk is still lit. Somewhere above you, the deck chairs are folded and stacked for the night. The smoking room is emptying of its last card players. The stewards are doing their final rounds of the corridors, checking that nothing needs attention before the night deepens fully. In the wireless room, Jack Phillips is still at his instrument, sending a backlog of passenger messages into the dark Atlantic air. The stars outside the porthole are very bright. You cannot see them from the berth. You only know they are there because you saw them an hour ago from the stern rail, the Milky Way across the south and Orion setting in the west. You wake to a changed quality of light. The porthole shows a sky that is brighter than yesterday, still gray, but a brighter gray. The cloud cover thinner and higher, with a quality of pale, diffused sunlight coming through it that is different from the flat overcast of the Irish Sea. You lie in the berth for a moment and feel the ship. She is moving steadily, with the long, slow rhythm of the open Atlantic. The Irish Sea's shorter chop is gone. Out here the ocean has room to build its swells over thousands of miles, and they arrive beneath the hull in long, gradual undulations that the ship absorbs without drama. The engines are as they always are. They are the constant. You have stopped noticing them the way you stop noticing your own breathing. They are present, always present, and only the absence of them would make you aware. You dress and go up to breakfast. The corridor on D deck is already active. A steward is making his rounds, knocking on cabin doors with the particular rhythm that means hot water is available in the corridor bath. This is the daily routine. The bath stewards prepare the shared bathrooms from early morning, heating the seawater, not fresh water, which is too precious to be used for bathing, in the copper-lined tubs on the lower decks. To use the bath, you make a reservation with your bedroom steward the evening before, who passes it along. The tubs are cleaned between each use by the bath attendant. The whole arrangement is more formal than anything you have at home, which is, now that you think about it, the point. In second class, shipboard life is conducted with a ceremony slightly beyond what you would normally afford. The second-class dining saloon is already half full when you arrive. The routine of shipboard life establishes itself quickly. By the third day, people have found their preferred seats, their preferred breakfast times, their preferred companions. You are not a particularly social traveler, but you are a good conversationalist when it is called for, and the table you have occupied since Tuesday has acquired a loose group of regular diners whose company you find agreeable. The woman traveling to join her husband in New York is named Mrs. Ada Clark. She is from London and speaks with the particular careful precision of someone who has practiced speaking well. Not upper class, but aspiring to the patterns of upper class speech without quite achieving their ease. Her husband works in the garment district on Lower Manhattan. She has not seen him in 14 months. She is going out in advance of a decision not yet made, whether to stay in America or to bring him back to England. And you can see in the way she talks about New York that she does not know yet what she wants the answer to be. The engineer from Manchester is called Mr. Howard Irwin. He has wide, reddened hands and the habit of buttering his bread with great thoroughness, covering every millimeter of the surface before taking a bite. He is traveling to visit cousins in Boston who have been urging him to consider emigrating. He says this with a measured neutrality that suggests he has not yet decided how he feels about the idea. The clergyman is the Reverend Ernest Carter. He is traveling to attend a conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church in New York. He is an alert, mild-mannered man of about 50, with the habit of asking a question and then listening to the answer with such evident interest that you find yourself saying more than you intended. These are the people at your table. You have learned them in the way you learn people on trains and ships, in fragments over meals, in the accumulation of small details rather than the delivery of histories. By Friday morning, you know them well enough to exchange remarks without formality, and not well enough to know what is true about them. Breakfast is fruit, Rolled oats, kippers, eggs, you eat steadily. After breakfast, you go to the second-class library. The library is your territory on this ship. You spend more hours here than anywhere else, reading in the mornings, writing in the afternoons, occasionally sitting with a cup of tea and watching the other passengers through the porthole when concentration fails. The room has become familiar. You know which chairs are most comfortable, which lamps provide the best reading light, which corner is quietest. You have borrowed 2 books from the ship's collection so far, and are partway through a third. On the 12th of April, the sea temperature is around 55 degrees Fahrenheit, cold but not approaching freezing. The air temperature on deck is somewhere in the low 50s, and with the wind created by the ship's forward motion, it feels colder. You have taken to wearing your wool gloves on the promenade deck and keeping your collar turned up. The North Atlantic in April is not hospitable to prolonged standing around outside, which is why you appreciate the library. The ship's daily run is posted at noon on the notice board near the second-class purser's office on E-deck. This is a shipboard tradition, the calculation of how far the ship has traveled since the previous noon, posted for all to see, a small performance of transparency and efficiency. Passengers in all classes bet on it. You do not bet on it, but you read it. From Southampton on the morning of the 10th to Cherbourg and the start of the Atlantic run, the Titanic covered the preliminary legs efficiently. From her position at 2:20 in the afternoon on the 11th of April, the time she left Queenstown, to noon on the 12th, she has covered 484 nautical miles. This is her first full day's run on the open ocean, and it is a respectable number, slightly below her expected daily average of 500 to 520 nautical miles, partly because she spent the first few hours of the morning in the Irish Sea at reduced speed. Beneath the decks you are sitting on, the machinery that produces this number is operating with the particular concentrated intensity of industrial power on a massive scale. There are 29 boilers in the Titanic's boiler rooms, arranged in 6 compartments running from forward to aft along the ship's keel. Each boiler contains anywhere from 2 to 3 furnace doors, and through each furnace door a coal trimmer shovels coal from the bunkers that line the sides of the boiler rooms. The coal is brought by bucket from the bunkers to the furnace doors by the coal trimmers, who work in the boiler rooms themselves in temperatures that routinely exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The firemen, senior to the trimmers, tend the fires, regulating the draft, banking the coals, managing the burn rate to maintain steam pressure at the desired level. The firemen and trimmers work 4 hours on, 8 hours off, 3 shifts, rotating around the clock. At full operation, the Titanic's boiler rooms consume approximately 825 tons of coal per day. That is roughly 34 tons per hour. Each ton of coal produces approximately 2,600 pounds of steam at the pressures required for the main engines. You sit above all of this in the library and read, hearing none of it, feeling it only as the steady vibration in the floor and the faint warmth of the pipes that run behind the library's oak paneling. The Titanic's navigation is managed from the bridge, the enclosed command space on the boat deck that runs the full width of the ship. The officers on watch, rotating through 4-hour shifts around the clock, maintain the ship's course, monitor the weather and the sea, and log everything. Captain Smith visits the bridge regularly but does not stand continuous watch himself. He has 6 officers beneath him who do that work. The 6 are First Officer William Murdoch, Second Officer Charles Lightoller, Third Officer Herbert Pittman, 4th Officer Joseph Boxhall, 5th Officer Harold Lowe, and 6th Officer James Moody. Behind the bridge, in a small enclosed room, is the chart room where the navigating officers plot the ship's position and course. The Titanic's course across the Atlantic follows a predetermined track, a set of waypoints called the Outward Southern Track, agreed upon by the major shipping lines each season to route vessels away from the worst ice. The track in April bends south of the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, that enormous shallow plateau off Canada's eastern coast where cold Labrador current water and warm Gulf Stream water meet, and where icebergs from Greenland's glaciers drift south and accumulate. The outward southern track is not perfect. Icebergs drift farther south in some years than others, but it represents the collective wisdom of decades of Atlantic navigation, encoded in waypoints on charts. The first waypoint on the westward track is called the Corner, a position at 42 degrees north latitude, 47 degrees west longitude, where the ship turns from a southwesterly heading to a more westerly one. The Titanic is scheduled to reach the Corner on the afternoon of Sunday the 14th. After that, she runs more or less due west across the last stretch of the Atlantic toward New York. You learn this not from the officers, but from another second-class passenger you meet in the library on Friday afternoon, a retired sea captain named Robert Douglas, who made Atlantic crossings for 40 years before his retirement, and now travels occasionally for pleasure. He explains the track system with the quiet pride of a man who knows something well, drawing an invisible map on the surface of the reading table with his index finger. He is a small, compact man in his late 60s, with the very still quality of someone who has spent long periods at sea, where restlessness is a liability. You spend an hour in his company on Friday afternoon, and he tells you things you did not know. He tells you that this winter was unusually mild in the Arctic, and that the ice season in 1912 has been worse than usual, more bergs breaking loose from the Greenland glaciers, drifting farther south on the Labrador current before the Gulf Stream melts them. He says the ice reports coming in by wireless from ships ahead of the Titanic have mentioned bergs and field ice in the track. He says the company knows this. He says the company knows everything, and the company makes its decisions, and the captains carry them out. He does not say this with alarm. He says it the way a man says a thing that is simply true, without inflection. You thank him for the explanation. He nods and returns to his book. You sit for a while in the library and think about what he said, and then you also return to your book, and by dinner time you have stopped thinking about it. Dinner on the 12th is the same long dining saloon, the same bolted swivel chairs, the same hand-carried dishes. The second-class menu for this evening includes consommé, roast mutton, roast beef, jacket potatoes, ox tongue, sausages, pickles, and salad, and for dessert, tapioca pudding, apple tart, fresh fruit, cheese, and biscuits. The food is what it always is, substantial, well-prepared, and slightly incongruous with the formal china and starched linen that surrounds it. This is the particular quality of second class on the Titanic. Good food in beautiful surroundings, without quite the ease that would make the surroundings feel earned. After dinner, you spend the evening in the library. Around 9 o'clock, two men at the table near yours begin a quiet but clearly engaged theological argument about something in the Psalms. You are not a religious man in any active sense. You were brought up in a Christian household and retain the forms of faith without the content. But you find the argument interesting to overhear. One man is the Reverend Carter. The other is a man you have not seen before, introduced by someone as the Reverend John Harper, a Scottish Baptist minister traveling to preach at the Moody Church in New York. Harper is 39 years old. He is traveling with his daughter Nana, who is 6, and his sister-in-law, who is caring for the child. He is a widower. His wife, Annie, died when Nana was 11 months old. He boarded this ship to preach in America, which is what he does. The argument between him and the Reverend Carter is engaged and genuinely unresolved. The kind of theological conversation that goes nowhere productive but satisfies both parties. You do not join the conversation. You read. By 10 o'clock you go to your cabin. The ship runs west. The engines run. The wake is straight in the dark Atlantic water. You sleep. Saturday morning, the 13th of April. The weather today is the best yet. The cloud cover has thinned to scattered patches, and there is real sun, thin, pale April sun, coming over the horizon from the east and catching the white foam at the bow. The wind is moderate from the northwest, and the sea has a light chop on the surface of the longer swells. The air temperature on deck is in the mid-50s Fahrenheit. For this latitude and season, this is favorable. You can feel, stepping out onto the promenade, the particular pleasure of open air that you do not quite get indoors. The noon daily run is posted 519 nautical miles since noon on the 12th. This is a better number. The ship has found her rhythm. She is running at her service speed, 21 to 22 knots, without strain. Precisely at noon, the officers on the bridge take their sun sights with sextants, and the navigator plots the ship's position on the chart. The Titanic is at approximately 43 degrees north latitude, 44 degrees west longitude, well past the halfway point of the Atlantic crossing. She has traveled roughly 1,500 miles from Queenstown. She has roughly 1,300 miles remaining to New York. The Atlantic at this position is more than 12,000 feet deep. The floor of the ocean beneath you is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a range of underwater mountains running the length of the Atlantic Basin, formed by the tectonic spreading of the ocean floor. Above it, the water column is cold and dark. The surface, which you can see from the rail, gives no indication of what is below. It is simply sea, gray-blue, with the ship's wake cutting a white road behind you that extends to the horizon and then disappears. There is something in the quality of this day that invites the deck chairs. You take one of the deck chairs on the second-class aft promenade and sit in the thin sun with your book and your gloves and your wool coat, and you read for 2 hours. Other passengers are doing the same. The engineer from Manchester has taken a chair and fallen asleep behind a copy of the London Illustrated News. A family with 2 small children has claimed a section of railing, and the children are running along the deck while their mother calls after them in a tone of mild, practiced exasperation. The third-class passengers have their own separate open-air space at the very stern of the ship, a smaller promenade deck on the fantail, where they spend their deck time. From the second-class aft promenade you can sometimes hear them, faintly, voices and occasional laughter. You cannot see them directly, but on Saturday afternoon you become aware of a sound you cannot quite identify, and when you look aft and slightly down you can just make out, through a gap in the deck structure, a figure with bagpipes. You will remember this specifically later. A Scottish man in third class, playing the pipes on the stern deck in the April sun, with the Atlantic spreading out behind him and the Titanic's wake cutting white through the blue-gray water. Around him, people are dancing. A rough, unskillful jig, not a formal dance. Just bodies moving in the cold air because the music asked them to. Some children are attempting to skip rope. A game of some kind, loud and physically demanding, is happening near the rail. These are people traveling on a ticket that cost them £7 5 shillings. The third-class fare from Southampton, £7 5 shillings, was everything many of them had, or close to it. It is less than you paid for your ticket by nearly £6. On the Titanic, the distance between £7 and £13 is the distance between that stern deck and your library chair. You listen to the pipes for a while. In the smoking room on B deck, a room for men, as all smoking rooms were in 1912, the card games have been running most of the day. This is usual on Atlantic crossings. There are professional gamblers on virtually every major liner crossing the Atlantic, known to the shipping lines, tolerated but officially condemned. They travel in second or first class, dress well, present themselves as businessmen or travelers of independent means, and spend the days identifying likely marks among the wealthier passengers. The White Star Line includes a notice in the cabin pocket of every stateroom, a small printed card advising passengers that professional card players are known to travel on Atlantic liners and that the company is not responsible for losses in private gambling. The card plays in second class are generally more modest than those in first class. The amounts at stake are the amounts that middle-class men on holidays can afford to lose, and in some cases cannot. The games are primarily whist and poker, and they run from late morning through the evening with varying players. You are not a gambling man and you do not participate, but you pass through the smoking room twice on Saturday and note the tables and the intent faces above them. This is a kind of life that the ship creates, a temporary world with its own routines, its own social geography, its own cast of recurring characters. You have been on this ship for 4 days, and you know the library's chairs by preference, and the dining saloon table by habit, and the smoking room by glance. By tomorrow, you will know the ship better than some cities you have lived in. After dinner on Saturday, a dinner that includes the now familiar roast meats, the bolted swivel chairs, the hand-carried dishes, the table companions you know well enough to like, you walk the entire perimeter of the second-class promenade deck before going to your cabin. The stars tonight are extraordinary. They are the clearest stars you have seen since last night, and last night they were the clearest you had seen since the night before. Each night out from land, the sky gets darker and the stars get brighter. Tonight there is no moon. The Milky Way is a visible band across the sky, faint but unmistakably present, the way it never is in cities. The Southern Cross is still below the horizon, but you can see low in the south a scattering of stars that you do not recognize from the London sky, which is always washed out and hazy. This is not incidental to the crossing. The stars are, and have always been, how ships find their position at sea. The sextant, the chronometer, the noon sight, these are the instruments that translate the angles between stars and the horizon into numbers on a chart. A ship without stars is a ship navigating by dead reckoning, estimated position, known course, calculated speed. Dead reckoning accumulates error, stars correct it. The clarity of the sky tonight means the officers on the bridge have a very precise fix on their position. The sea tonight is remarkably calm, calmer than any night since Southampton. The chop that gave the day's sunlit surface some texture has quieted, and the swells are long and low and widely spaced. The Atlantic out here has a quality of stillness that you did not expect. You stand at the rail and look at the stars and the water for a while. The ship is running at 22 knots tonight, a little above her usual service speed. You can feel it in the vibration of the rail beneath your hands, which is imperceptibly sharper than it was yesterday. The officers on the bridge are watching the position calculations with some interest. The Titanic is performing well. She is, by all observable measures, exactly what she was designed to be. A large, comfortable, reliable ship crossing the Atlantic on schedule. Tomorrow is Sunday. There will be a church service in the second-class dining saloon. Captain Smith will conduct the first-class service himself in the first-class dining saloon, following tradition. The service includes the hymn, Eternal Father, Strong to Save, the Royal Navy hymn, known among seamen as the Sailor's Hymn, with its plea to the God of the sea, O hear us when we cry to thee, for those in peril on the sea. You do not think about the hymn tonight. You stand at the rail and let the cold air settle on your face and hands, and after a while you go inside, and the door closes behind you, and the warmth of the corridor is immediate. Somewhere below your feet, in the coal bunkers of number 5 boiler room, a fire that has been burning since before the ship left Belfast finally goes out. It was extinguished by the coal trimmers and firemen who have been working to trace it and smother it since the voyage began. Coal bunker fires are not unusual on ships of this type. Coal is susceptible to spontaneous combustion when packed densely in large quantities, particularly in the enclosed warmth of a ship's bunkers where the coal presses against itself and generates heat from within. When a bunker fire is discovered, the standard procedure is to shovel the burning coal directly into the furnaces, using it as fuel, which simultaneously extinguishes it and removes it from the bunker. This particular fire, while it required sustained attention from the trimmers over the past week, was never a threat to the ship's watertight integrity or her structural strength. The coal around it was removed and consumed. The fire simply stopped. No one tells the passengers. There is no reason to. It is the kind of ordinary operational matter that ships manage without comment. Like a stuck valve or a loose fitting, the passengers are paying to cross the Atlantic in comfort, not to receive reports on bunker management. In the wireless room, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride are working their evening shift. The Titanic's wireless equipment, a Marconi Type 2 set, among the most powerful installed on any ship afloat, is sending and receiving on a frequency of approximately 500 kHz, the standard maritime frequency of the era. At this time of night, with the atmospheric conditions favorable and no daylight absorption of the signal, the Titanic's wireless can reach across the Atlantic. Cape Race, Newfoundland, is within range. Ships within 400 miles can communicate clearly. Ships farther away are faint but possible. The wireless traffic is almost entirely commercial and personal tonight. Passengers' messages, business telegrams, social notes. The volume is significant. The wealthy passengers in first class have been sending and receiving messages since Southampton, using the wireless as casually as they would use a telephone if telephones could cross the Atlantic. The Marconi operators are paid by the message, beyond their base rate from the company, which gives them a financial incentive to process as much traffic as possible. They process it conscientiously. You go to your cabin and undress and get into the berth. The ship is very smooth tonight, smoother than any night yet. The motion beneath you is barely present, more a sensation of floating than of being carried. You lie on your back and feel the ceiling above you, pale in the dim light from the desk lamp, and you listen. There is no sound beyond the engines, no wind against the porthole, no sound of water. The sea outside is flat enough that the ship's bow cuts it without the usual hiss and percussion of waves at the hull. You are in the mid-Atlantic, on a flat, calm night, in a large, quiet ship, more than 1,000 miles from the nearest significant land. You think about this for a moment. The distance, the depth of water beneath you, the precision with which the officers above you are tracking your position across the face of the ocean. You think about the retired sea captain in the library and what he said about the ice reports coming in from ships ahead. Then you stop thinking about it. There is nothing to be done about it tonight. The ship is running. The officers are watching. The wireless is open. Tomorrow is Sunday, and the ship will be one day closer to New York. And after New York, there is America. And after America, Canada and your brother's house in Toronto, which you have not visited in several years. You wake to stillness. The porthole shows a sky of extraordinary clarity, the kind of clarity you get when an anticyclone settles over a region and the air becomes cold and dry and absolutely transparent. The cloud cover that has been present in varying degrees since Southampton is gone. The sky is a pale, hard blue, deepening toward the zenith, and in it the sun is already above the horizon to the southeast, casting a long, flat light across the sea surface that makes the water look like hammered pewter. You lie in the berth for a moment and feel the ship. She is the smoothest she has been. The long Atlantic swells are still present beneath the hull, but the surface chop is entirely gone. The sea is, in the language of the Beaufort scale, a force 1, smooth with ripples only, no visible waves. The wind is near nothing. The air coming through the porthole gap is cold, noticeably colder than yesterday, and clean. You dress and go to breakfast. At breakfast, the conversation at your table is, for once, not about America or the ship. The Reverend Carter mentions that it is Sunday and that there will be a service this morning in the dining saloon, and asks whether those around the table plan to attend. Most say they will. The engineer from Manchester says he has not been to a church service in 11 years and does not plan to start now, and says this with the comfortable defiance of a man who has made peace with his position on the matter. Mrs. Clark says she will attend. You say you will attend. The second-class Sunday service is conducted not by Captain Smith, who takes the first-class service in the first-class dining saloon at 10:30, but by the Reverend Carter himself, assisted by the other clergymen traveling in second class, of whom there are several. Father Thomas Biles, a Catholic priest, will also hold a separate Mass for the Catholic passengers in the second-class dining saloon after the Protestant service. Father Biles is 42 years old and is traveling to New York to officiate at his brother's wedding. The service begins at 10:30 in the second-class dining saloon. The long tables have been rearranged where possible, and the passengers sit in the swivel chairs or stand along the walls. The upright Steinway piano at the forward end of the room is used for the first time since the ship left Southampton. You sit in a swivel chair near the middle of the room and listen to the Reverend Carter lead the service. The liturgy is straightforward, the forms of Anglican morning worship that have been used on English ships for generations. The prayers, the readings, the hymns. The hymn "Eternal Father, Strong to Save" is sung, as it always is on ships, as it has been sung on English vessels since 1861, when William Whiting wrote it for a student about to make a sea voyage. The final verse is, "O Trinity of love and power, our brethren shield in danger's hour. From rock and tempest, fire and foe, protect them wheresoe'er they go. Thus evermore shall rise to thee glad hymns of praise from land and sea. Around 200 people are in the dining saloon for the combined services. A significant portion of the second-class passengers are clergymen, missionaries, or people with strong religious affiliations. It is not a coincidence, this being a cross-section of the British and American middle class in 1912, for whom Sunday observance is still a social and moral expectation. The Reverend John Harper, the Baptist minister, attends. He sits near the front and sings with his full voice, which is a strong one. After the service, the passengers disperse into the Sunday morning. The day is clear and cold and beautiful. You go up to the boat deck. The boat deck on a clear morning is a different space from the boat deck in the Channel Grey. The sun is still low enough that it angles across the deck from the south, catching the white-painted metal of the davits and the canvas covers of the lifeboats. The sea stretches out in every direction to a horizon that is sharp and definite. The particular horizon you only see on a clear day over a calm sea, where the edge of the world looks precisely drawn. The temperature on deck is around 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Colder than yesterday. You can see your breath. Your gloves are essential, but the sun is on your face, and the light is extraordinary, and the effect is of a winter day that is somehow also inviting. Several other passengers are on the boat deck. An elderly couple walks slowly from stem to stern, arm in arm, at a pace that is neither exercise nor leisure but something in between. A young woman is leaning on the rail with a letter in her hand, reading it over again. Two men you do not recognize are having an earnest conversation in a foreign language, German perhaps, or Dutch. You walk the deck slowly from end to end. At noon, the officers gather on the bridge wing to take the sun's altitude with their sextants, the traditional noon sight, the observation that fixes the ship's latitude and, in conjunction with the chronometers, confirms the longitude. This ritual has been performed on every ship crossing every ocean for centuries. The sextant was invented in 1731. The marine chronometer, which allows longitude to be calculated with precision, was developed by John Harrison in the 1760s, and before its invention, longitude at sea was guessed at, estimated, approximated, and frequently wrong, with fatal consequences. You cannot see the noon sight from where you stand, but you know it is happening because the ship slows imperceptibly around noon. Not to a stop, but the faintest reduction in the vibration in the deck, as though the engines are drawing a breath. The officers take their observations. The navigator plots the position. The daily run is calculated. 546 nautical miles since yesterday's noon. This is the best daily run of the voyage. The Titanic's total distance from Queenstown to this noon position is approximately 1,550 nautical miles. She has roughly 1,250 miles remaining to the Ambrose lightship off New York, the navigational waypoint that marks the end of the Atlantic crossing and the beginning of the American coastal waters. At her current rate, she will arrive Wednesday morning, April the 17th. There is talk among the first-class passengers, which filters through to second class in the way information always filters between classes, through stewards, through overheard conversations, through the purposeful carelessness of those who want to seem well-informed, that Bruce Ismay has proposed arriving in New York on Tuesday instead of Wednesday, a full day ahead of schedule, as a demonstration of the ship's capabilities. Whether this is true and whether Captain Smith has agreed to it, you do not know. You hear it mentioned at lunch. Captain Edward John Smith is 62 years old. He has been sailing the Atlantic for the White Star Line since 1887, 25 years of crossings, the last 7 of them as the senior captain in the fleet. He commanded the Baltic, the Adriatic, the Majestic, the Olympic. He is the most trusted, most experienced, and most senior commander White Star has. This is his last voyage. He was to retire after delivering the Titanic to New York. He is on this ship because his retirement had been announced and delayed before, and because the maiden voyage of the Titanic was the kind of occasion that called for the most eminent commander available. The passengers knew his name before they boarded. They felt safer for it. This is posted at the purser's office and makes its way through the ship with the speed that information always travels on vessels at sea, from passenger to passenger, table to table, until everyone knows without quite being able to say how they found out. 546 miles. This is the best daily run yet. The ship is performing extremely well. What is not posted at the purser's office, and what makes its way through the ship more slowly and incompletely, is the wireless traffic on this subject. At 9 in the morning, the wireless room received a message from the SS Caronia reporting bergs, growlers, and field ice at 42 degrees north, between 49 and 51 degrees west. This message was delivered to the bridge. Captain Smith acknowledged it and asked the officers to take note. At 1:42 in the afternoon, the RMS Baltic transmitted a message reporting large quantities of field ice approximately 250 miles ahead on the Titanic's current track, along with the position of 2 large steamers that had stopped due to ice. This message was delivered to Captain Smith, who passed it to J. Bruce Ismay, the White Star Line's managing director, who is traveling as a passenger on this voyage. Ismay put the message in his pocket. He showed it to 2 passengers at tea that afternoon, almost casually, as a curiosity, before the captain asked for its return and posted it in the chart room at 7:15 in the evening. You do not know any of this on Sunday. You have lunch in the dining saloon at 1 o'clock. The Sunday lunch in second class is a full meal: cock-a-leekie soup, corned beef and vegetables, roast mutton, potatoes, jam and bread. A modest but complete midday meal, eaten at the long tables with the familiar faces. The Reverend Harper is at an adjoining table, animated in conversation with a man you do not know. Mrs. Clark is talking about New York. The engineer from Manchester has found another engineer to talk shop with, and the 2 of them are discussing the Titanic's triple-screw propulsion system with the enthusiasm of men who understand machinery. You listen to fragments of their conversation. They are correct about most of what they say. After lunch, you return to the library. The afternoon passes quietly. The sun moves around the southern horizon, low as April sun always is this far north, but bright and constant. From the library porthole, the sea is a long, barely disturbed surface that reflects the sky. You read for most of the afternoon. By 4 o'clock, you are aware that the temperature is dropping. You feel it first through the porthole gap, which you have opened a crack for air. The temperature of the air coming through it is noticeably lower than an hour ago. You get up and close the porthole. 15 minutes later, another passenger in the library comments that it has gotten cold suddenly and goes to fetch a heavier coat. By 4:30, the temperature on deck is in the low 30s. By 5:30, it is at 33 degrees Fahrenheit. By 7:30, it will be exactly 33 degrees, just barely above freezing. Second Officer Lightoller, on watch from 6 in the evening, notices the temperature drop. He orders the ship's carpenter to check the fresh water supply. When temperatures fall below freezing, the freshwater tanks can freeze, and a ship's fresh water is its most critical consumable. He orders the deck crew to monitor conditions carefully. What you do not know, sitting in the library, is that this temperature drop of 10 degrees in less than 2 hours is the fingerprint of an Arctic anticyclone moving across the ship's position. The same high-pressure weather system that has given you the beautiful, clear day has brought this cold. It is the signature of a mass of Arctic air that swept down from the north and settled over the North Atlantic, displacing the relatively milder air that has accompanied the crossing since Queenstown. This cold air, combined with the almost complete absence of wind, is producing sea surface conditions that have no parallel in the experience of the surviving accounts. The ocean is becoming a mirror. When water is this cold and this still, it does not display the white caps and surface ripple that allow lookouts to see breaking water at the base of an iceberg from a distance. In normal sea conditions, in any kind of swell, in any kind of wind, icebergs create a visual disturbance around their waterline. The swell breaks against them. The disturbed water is white and visible. A lookout does not need to see the iceberg itself. He sees the disturbed water first, from miles away, and it announces the berg. On a perfectly flat, dark, freezing sea in starlight, there is no disturbed water. The iceberg and the sea around it are the same color, black. The iceberg is dark above the waterline and dark at it. It does not announce itself. It is simply a dark shape, and the sea is dark, and the darkness is complete. In 1912, this is known. The phenomenon of a flat, dark sea masking icebergs from lookout observation is in the maritime literature. It is known to experienced captains the way many things are known, understood in principle, encountered in reality far less often than the principle suggests, and therefore not given the weight it perhaps deserves in operational decision-making. You do not think about this in the library. You think about your book. At 6 o'clock you go up to the promenade for fresh air before dinner, and the cold is immediate and total. Your coat is not quite sufficient. You last 10 minutes on deck and then go back inside. The sea stretching away from the ship is the most beautiful thing you have seen on this voyage, flat and dark and gleaming faintly under a sky that is just beginning to darken toward evening. With the sun near the horizon in the southwest, the light horizontal and gold and very clear. It is very beautiful, and it is very, very cold. Dinner tonight is the same second-class dining saloon, but the atmosphere is somehow more settled than previous evenings. Not quieter exactly, but more domestic. People have been together long enough now that the meals have a different quality. The strangers of Tuesday have become the familiar faces of Sunday. You know the people at your table. You know enough of the larger dining room by sight to nod across the room to people you have passed in the library or on the promenade. On D-deck, just forward of the second-class dining saloon, through a wall and a corridor and a class barrier that might as well be a continent, the first-class dining saloon is also at dinner, a larger, more ornate room decorated in the Jacobean style, with carved, white-painted wood paneling and tables laid with the finest white star-line silver. Captain Smith, on most evenings, dines with selected passengers in the first-class saloon as a social duty. Tonight he is attending a dinner party hosted by the Wideners, George and Eleanor Widener of Philadelphia, Wealthy patrons of the arts traveling back from Europe after commissioning a new library building for Harvard University. The party includes several prominent first-class passengers. Captain Smith leaves the dinner party at approximately 8:55 and returns to the bridge, where he discusses the weather and the ice reports with Second Officer Lightoller for approximately 25 minutes. At 9:20, he retires to his quarters, telling Lightoller that if things become at all doubtful, he should be called. The second-class dinner for the 14th of April. Consommé with tapioca, baked haddock with sharp sauce, curried chicken and rice, spring lamb with mint sauce, roast turkey with cranberry sauce, green peas, pureed turnips, boiled and roast potatoes. For dessert, plum pudding, wine jelly, coconut sandwich biscuits, American ice cream, assorted nuts, fresh fruit, cheese, and biscuits. You will remember this menu specifically. It will be discussed in testimony and recorded in newspapers and become, in the years that follow, one of the most documented last meals in history. You eat without that knowledge. You eat without any particular awareness that this is the last dinner you will eat on the Titanic. The Reverend Harper eats his dinner with evident appetite and then stays at the table for a long time after the plates are cleared, talking with whoever will listen. He is the kind of man who does not wind down in the evenings. His energy has the quality of something that produces more of itself the longer it runs. Conviction feeding on conversation, argument sharpening into clarity, a life lived publicly and loudly without apology. He is not difficult to like, even if his intensity would be exhausting to live with daily. You finish your dinner and thank Mrs. Clark for the conversation and wish the Reverend Carter a good evening and go back to your cabin. It is about 9 o'clock. You sit on the edge of the berth and take off your shoes and read a few pages of your book. The ship is moving with absolute smoothness, the smoothest it has been at any point on the voyage. There is almost no motion at all. The berth beneath you might as well be a bed in a room on land. The only evidence that you are at sea is the faint vibration from the engines and the porthole showing darkness outside. The temperature in the cabin is warm. The central heating system has been running all day, and the cabin is comfortable. Outside on the decks, it is below freezing. In the wireless room above and forward of you, Jack Phillips is working through a backlog of passenger messages, transmitting them to Cape Race, Newfoundland, where they will be relayed inland. There are many messages to send. Social telegrams, business communications, the accumulated correspondence of 200 and odd passengers who have remembered that they are out of touch with the world and wish to remedy it. Phillips is focused and efficient and irritated because the wireless equipment broke down this morning and he spent most of the day repairing it, and now he has twice the normal volume of traffic to process. At 9:30, Second Officer Lightoller, on the bridge, orders the lookouts in the crow's nest to watch carefully for ice and to report any ice they see. He also orders that the temperature of the seawater be checked regularly. The crow's nest lookouts tonight are Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee. They are perched in their iron basket 60 feet above the waterline, in air that is below freezing, watching the dark water ahead of the ship. They do not have binoculars. The binoculars that were assigned to the crow's nest were left in Southampton when the ship changed officers late in her preparation period, and no one has found the locker where they are stored. Fleet and Lee are watching the dark ocean with their naked eyes. At 9:40, the Mesaba sends a message to the Titanic reporting heavy pack ice and a great number of large icebergs in a position that lies directly across the Titanic's current track. Jack Phillips does not deliver this message to the bridge. He is working through his commercial traffic backlog and the Masaba's message, which was not preceded by the prefix MSG, Master's Service Gram, that would have required him to stop and deliver it to Captain Smith personally, is set aside. It is never delivered. At 10 o'clock, you put down your book. You have been reading without quite concentrating. Your eyes have been moving across the lines of text, but your mind has been elsewhere, in that loose, half-formed way that precedes sleep. The lamp on the desk is the only light in the cabin. The porthole shows the complete darkness of a moonless night on the open Atlantic. At 10:55, the Californian, a small cargo steamer from the Leyland Line, is stopped in the ice field approximately 19 miles to the north of the Titanic's position. She has been stopped since 10 o'clock, unable to proceed. Her wireless operator attempts to contact the Titanic to warn her of the ice. The Titanic's position and the Californian's are close enough that the Californian's signal is very strong, almost painfully loud in Phillips's headphones, which are tuned for the faint long-range signals he has been sending to Cape Race. Phillips, focused on the commercial traffic, sends back, shut up, I am busy, I am working Cape Race." The Californian's operator transmits the warning only partially. Then, at 11:30, the Californian's wireless operator closes down for the night and goes to bed. At 11 o'clock, the temperature of the water is 31 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 degree below the freezing point of fresh water. Salt water freezes at a slightly lower temperature. The sea is perfectly flat. The air is perfectly still. The stars are the brightest they have been on the entire voyage. You are in your berth, very nearly asleep. You will describe this moment later when you write about it. You were reading in your bunk in cabin D56, and the movement of the ship ceased, and you felt what seemed like nothing more than a slight vibration in the mattress and a barely perceptible change in the ship's rhythm. Nothing violent, nothing dramatic, a tremor almost. The kind of thing that might, if you were less attentive, pass unnoticed entirely. You put down your book. At 11:40, the lookout Frederick Fleet, in the crow's nest 60 feet above the water, sees something in the darkness ahead of the ship. He picks up the telephone in the crow's nest and rings through to the bridge. Iceberg, right ahead. The officer of the watch, First Officer William Murdoch, is already moving. The order goes to the helm, hard a starboard. The order goes to the engine room, reverse engines, the great reciprocating engines, each the size of a 3-story building, begin their laborious shift of direction, but they cannot reverse quickly. The ship, 882 feet long, traveling at 22 knots, with the momentum of 46,000 tons behind her, is not a thing that turns quickly. The Titanic's bow begins to swing to port, left, away from the iceberg. She is turning, but she is not turning fast enough. The iceberg passes along the starboard side of the hull, the right side, with a sound that survivors describe variously. A grinding, a tearing, a long scraping sound, like something being dragged along a wall. Others say they heard almost nothing. Some say they felt it only as a slight shudder in the floor. You feel it in your berth as an extra motion, a slight lateral movement, a vibration that passes through the ship in 2 or 3 seconds and then is gone. The Titanic continues forward. She has not been struck head-on. She has been struck along her starboard side. A glancing blow, 90 seconds after Frederick Fleet rang the bell. In the few minutes that follow, you lie in your berth and consider what just happened. The ship is still moving. The engines, which were reversed, have now been stopped, and the vibration that is always present in the hull has changed quality. It is quieter, more irregular, as though something has been paused rather than stopped. You sit up in the berth. You get out of the berth and put on your shoes. What you do not know is this. The iceberg, passing along the starboard hull below the waterline, buckled and popped rivets along the seams of the hull plating in 5 of the 16 watertight compartments. The openings are not large. Modern analysis shows total opening area of 12 to 13 square feet across a length of nearly 300 feet. But water is now entering all 5 compartments simultaneously. The forward compartments, the mail room, the squash court, the cargo holds, the firemen's quarters, 2 boiler rooms are flooding. Thomas Andrews, the ship's chief designer from Harland and Wolff, who is on board for the maiden voyage to observe the ship in operation, will be called to the bridge within minutes. He will descend with Captain Smith into the forward areas and see the water rising in the mail room, the cargo holds, the firemen's quarters. He will do the arithmetic quickly. The ship is designed to float with 4 of her 16 watertight compartments flooded. 5 are flooding. The 5th compartment, Boiler Room 6, has not a vertical flooding through the bulkhead, but overflow flooding over the top of the bulkhead that was not built high enough. The bulkheads that were supposed to contain the water do not go all the way to the decks above them. Water will flow over them one by one, filling each compartment in turn. Andrews will tell Captain Smith that the ship has approximately 1 to 2 hours. 1 to 2 hours. But you do not know this yet. You stand in your cabin in the dim lamplight, 1 shoe on and 1 shoe off, and you feel the ship. She is still, stiller than she has ever been. The engines are not running. The vibration that has been the constant under everything, the heartbeat of the crossing, the presence you stopped noticing after the first night, is gone. And in the silence where it used to be, you hear, for the first time, the sound of the ocean. It is a very quiet sound, a small, dark lapping against the hull. The engines of the Titanic have stopped for the last time. You put on your 2nd shoe. You stand in the cabin and listen to the silence. Outside the porthole, the stars are still there. They are very bright. The sea is very flat. The air is very cold. You reach for your coat. You stand in the corridor outside your cabin with one hand on the wall. The ship is not moving. This fact, which was present at the end of the last few seconds in your cabin, is still present now in the corridor, under your feet, in the soles of your shoes. The vibration that has been the constant underneath everything, the heartbeat of the crossing, the thing you stopped noticing after the first day, is gone. The corridor is very quiet. The overhead lamps are still burning. Nothing is broken. Nothing is out of place. A door opens down the corridor. A steward appears, moving quickly and with purpose, dressed in his white jacket, carrying nothing. He sees you and pauses. You ask him if anything is the matter. He tells you there is nothing to worry about. He says the ship has stopped for a moment, but everything is all right. He continues down the corridor and disappears around the turn. You go back into your cabin and pull on your coat. You are not alarmed, not yet, not exactly, but you are alert in the particular way that a scientific mind becomes alert when a system behaves unexpectedly. The ship stopped. The ship does not stop in the middle of the North Atlantic without a reason. You want to know the reason. In the corridor, more doors are opening. Other passengers are appearing in various states of dress. A woman in a heavy dressing gown, an older man already fully clothed and carrying his hat as if about to go ashore, a young couple whose faces are composed into the careful blankness of people managing something they do not yet have words for. Nobody says anything definitive. People look at each other the way people look at each other when none of them knows what is happening. You go up to the deck. The time is, as best you can estimate it, approximately 5 minutes past midnight. You have been lying in your berth for roughly 20 minutes since the collision. The deck you emerge onto is the second-class promenade, and the air that hits you is colder than anything you have felt since leaving England. A cold that is not simply low temperature, but a quality of absolute stillness. A cold that has no wind in it, no movement, only depth. The sky above you is the most brilliant sky you have ever seen. Black, completely clear, crowded with stars from horizon to horizon. The Milky Way a visible band. The whole turning bowl of the sky, present and exact and utterly silent. The deck is not empty. There are perhaps a dozen other passengers already here. People who, like you, heard or felt something and came up to look. They are standing in small groups, speaking in low voices, looking outward at the sea. The sea itself is extraordinary, perfectly flat, perfectly still, black and slightly luminescent under the starlight, stretching away in every direction to an invisible horizon. There is no wind, there is no swell, there is no sound of water. You look over the rail. Far below, 90 feet below the rail where you stand, the ocean's surface is a mirror. You cannot see it clearly from this height in the darkness, but you can feel its quality. The quality of a surface that is not behaving as a surface should, that is too still, too flat, too dark. You look aft toward the ship's stern. The wake, which has been a white churning road behind the ship since Southampton, is gone. The water behind the stern is as flat and dark as the water ahead. The ship has truly stopped. You look forward along the ship's side. And there, far forward on the starboard side of the boat deck, you can see shapes moving. Officers, the beginning of something. A man beside you, whom you do not know, says he was on the promenade when it happened. He says he saw a large, dark shape pass close to the starboard side of the ship. He says it moved very fast, or rather, the ship moved very fast relative to it, because the shape itself was stationary, and that it scraped along the hull for several seconds, with a sound like something being dragged over gravel, and then it was gone, and he looked over the rail and saw ice on the lower well deck, where it had broken off. This is the first information you have had about what happened. You thank him and go to the rail and look down. In the darkness below the promenade, on the well deck, you can see, very faintly in the starlight, white shapes on the deck, fragments. Passengers are standing among them. Some of them are picking the fragments up, examining them, passing them from hand to hand. They are playing with ice. They do not know what you are beginning to know. You know that the ship hit something large and hard on the starboard side. You know that the engines have stopped. You know that several minutes have passed and the engines have not restarted. These are facts. You stand in the cold and arrange them in your mind with the orderly attention of a man who was trained to observe without prejudice, and what they suggest is not yet fully formed, but it has a direction. You go below to check the ship. You take the stairs down one deck, E deck, and walk the corridor. The corridor is normal. The lamps burn. Doors are closed. Beneath your feet, the floor is solid and level. You take the stairs down to F deck. F deck is also normal, solid, level, quiet. A steward passes you carrying a tray with glasses on it, moving with the ordinary purpose of his work. You stop him and ask again whether anything is wrong. He says, "No, sir, just a small difficulty, nothing to worry about." His face is composed and gives nothing away. It is the face of a man who has been instructed to give nothing away. What the steward knows, and what you do not know, is that the situation below F deck is no longer normal at all. On the orlop deck, the lowest deck below the waterline, the 5 postal workers who have been sorting the Royal Mail since the ship left Queenstown are wading through water. The forward mail room is flooding. They have attempted to move the 400,000 items of mail, letters, parcels, registered packages from Southampton, Cherbourg, and Queenstown, up the companionways to higher ground. They are still trying. The water is winning. In Boiler Room 6, the furthest forward of the 6 boiler rooms, leading stoker Frederick Barrett and second engineer Hesketh were talking when the iceberg struck. Barrett described it later as a sound like thunder, and then the hull plate on the starboard side parted along a seam, and water came in at the base of the bulkhead, a green wall of it, and the 2 of them ran for the watertight door and cleared it before it closed. Boiler Room 6 is flooding. The compartment directly forward of it, the firemen's quarters, is flooding. The forward cargo holds are flooding. Thomas Andrews, the chief designer from Harland and Wolff, has been in the forward sections with Captain Smith for the last 15 minutes. He has seen what is flooding and he knows the mathematics. The ship was designed to float with 4 compartments open to the sea. 5 are flooding. He has done the calculation twice. He told the captain the result. 1 hour, perhaps 2, no more. At 12:10 in the morning, 6 minutes ago, while you were descending to E deck to check the floor, the wireless operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride began transmitting the distress call. The signal is CQD, the standard maritime distress call of 1912, derived from the older code for all stations, "Come quick, danger." Bride suggested to Phillips that he also try the newer signal, SOS, which had been adopted internationally in 1908 but was not yet universally recognized because it was simpler and less likely to be garbled at distance. They are sending both. They will be sending them until the last possible moment. The Carpathia, 60 miles away, picks up the signal at 12:20. Her operator, Harold Cottam, had been about to go to bed. He was still dressed, still at his instrument. He took the signal to Captain Rostron immediately. "You do not know any of this. You go back up to the promenade and lean on the rail." By now, perhaps 20 minutes after the collision, more passengers have come on deck. Some are in dressing gowns and slippers, clearly pulled from sleep by the jolt or by the sudden silence of the stopped engines. Some are fully dressed, like you. Some have life belts, the canvas and cork belts that hang in each cabin, slung over their shoulders or held in their hands, not quite wearing them, not quite putting them down. You do not have your life belt. You left it in the cabin. The ship is tilting. You do not notice it at first. It is not dramatic, not the visible tilt of a film vessel going under, but a barely perceptible inclination of the deck, a slight wrongness in what your feet tell you about the floor. You lean against the rail and you can feel it, forward and slightly to starboard, the deck not quite flat beneath you. The angle is perhaps 1 or 2 degrees. A pendulum hanging from the funnels would show it clearly. Your body shows it as a faint, persistent discomfort, a sense that the ground is not where it should be. You go back to your cabin. You get the life belt from the hook on the wall where it has hung untouched since Southampton. It is a rectangular vest of tightly packed cork covered in white canvas, with ties on the sides. You know how to put it on. The steward demonstrated this the first morning, a demonstration that everyone attended with polite inattention, in the way that people attend to safety instructions when they do not believe safety will be required. You put it on correctly. You tie the fastenings. The cork is dense and slightly rough against your coat. You take your book from the desk and put it in your coat pocket. You do not know why you do this. You do not analyze it. You put the book in your pocket and go back up to the deck. The time is now approximately midnight. Everything is changed. In the 15 minutes you were below, the boat deck above the second-class promenade has become a place of organized activity. Officers and crew are working at the davits, the steel cranes that hold the lifeboats. The boats are being uncovered, canvas covers stripped back, oars arranged inside, the davit cranks being turned to swing the boats outward over the side of the ship. The sound of this work is the sound of metal on metal, rope through pulley, the creak of steel under mechanical load, and above all of this, drowning much of it, the noise that you will describe later as one of the most distinctive sounds you have ever heard, the steam. When the Titanic's engines stopped, the boilers did not stop. The boilers are still at full pressure, steam at 215 pounds per square inch, contained in the massive cylindrical shells of the 29 furnaces that have been burning since Belfast. This steam has nowhere to go. The safety valves on the funnels have opened, releasing it directly into the air above the ship in enormous white plumes, with a noise that you describe later as 20 locomotives blowing off steam simultaneously. It is a harsh, deafening, mechanical roar that fills the entire deck, makes conversation difficult, makes thought difficult, occupies the air like something physical. And yet, and this is the quality you will keep returning to in your memory, the passengers on the deck are not panicking. They are standing, they are watching, they are speaking, where they can be heard in ordinary voices about ordinary things. The ship that brought them here has been beautifully and expensively arranged to make them comfortable, and its arrangement has been so complete and so well executed that even now, with the davits turning and the steam roaring and the deck tilted forward at an angle that is now unmistakably present, the dominant mood on the deck is not fear but a kind of arrested bewilderment. An officer comes along the deck, a young man, lightly dressed with a white muffler wrapped around his neck, as if he dressed quickly, which he did. He says, "All women and children get down to the deck below. All men stand back from the boats." The women in dressing gowns and coats begin to move. The men step back. You are a man. You step back. You watch the women file past you toward the stairs that lead down to the A-deck loading points. Some go willingly, some reluctantly. Some look back toward the men behind them with an expression that you cannot interpret fully in the dark, but that contains something that is not quite alarm and not quite doubt and not quite farewell. One woman stops at the top of the stairs and refuses to go. Her husband is standing with the group of men. She will not leave him. Two more women stop behind her, watching. The officer speaks to them patiently, his voice almost inaudible under the steam. Eventually, the women go down. The husband watches them go. He stands with the men. He does not move. You watch this. The first lifeboat is lowered at 12:45 on the starboard side. It is Boat 7, a 65-person wooden lifeboat, and you can see it from where you stand, swung out on its davits at the edge of the deck above, figures climbing in, the davit ropes slowly paying out. It descends the side of the ship, 90 feet of dark hull between it and the water, and the figures inside it are small and still against the size of the ship they are leaving. It reaches the water with 27 people in it. It can carry 65. You watch it row away from the ship's side. This is the number that your mind fixes on, 27 out of 65. You are a mathematics teacher, a science teacher more precisely, but the arithmetic is the same, 27 out of 65. The boat is less than half full, and it is pulling away from the ship that is sinking. The reason it is less than half full is not mysterious. The reason is standing on this deck around you. The people who will not believe that the ship is sinking. The Titanic is the most modern vessel afloat. The Titanic has the watertight compartments. The Titanic is, in the language that has become common, practically unsinkable. Stepping off the Titanic and into a small boat on a flat, dark ocean 90 feet below seems not like evacuation but like an error. A woman at the rail near you says exactly this. She does not see why she should leave the ship for that. You do not argue with her. You know something she does not know. Not facts exactly, but a direction, the direction the available facts are pointing. The ship is tilted forward and to starboard. The first lifeboat left with 27 people. The engines are not restarting. Somewhere below you, in places you cannot see, the 5 postal workers who were sorting mail in the room below the waterline have already been driven upward by rising water. The first distress rocket goes up at 12:45, simultaneously with the first lifeboat. It rises from the bridge area, a white rocket that climbs to perhaps 800 feet and bursts with a sound that carries across the flat water for miles. A sharp, loud crack, and then the white stars of the burst drifting down. This is not a signal flare. This is a distress signal. There is a protocol for distress signals, rockets fired at intervals over a ship in difficulty. Every officer on every ship within sight knows what rockets mean. The light that Boxhall, 4th Officer Boxhall, has been signaling with the Morse lamp for the past 20 minutes is still there, to the north, approximately 5 miles away. A ship. Its lights are visible. Boxhall has been flashing the lamp toward it, the letter sequences of the Morse code spelling out their situation, and the ship has not responded. It sits on the horizon and watches the rockets going up and does not come. This ship is the Californian. Her wireless operator shut down at 11:30 and went to bed. Her officers on watch see the rockets from the Titanic's bridge, see them clearly, discuss them, decide that they are probably company signals of some kind, and do not wake the captain. You do not know any of this. You watch the rocket burst and drift downward in white sparks, and you watch the distant light on the horizon, and you wonder. In the third-class areas of the ship, forward in the bow section and aft near the stern, the situation is different from the orderly, almost leisurely evacuation proceeding on the boat deck above you. The third-class passengers were not called to the boat deck at the same time as first and second class. Some of them were held at the gates, the locked gates between class areas, which existed for immigration law reasons as well as social ones, for periods ranging from minutes to far too long. Some stewards went into the third-class areas and led groups of passengers up through routes that would otherwise have been barred to them. Some gates were not opened at all. The third-class passengers who made it to the boat deck mostly did so on their own initiative, finding their way through the unfamiliar interior of a ship they had been given very little reason to learn. Of the 710 third-class passengers on the Titanic, 212 will survive. Of the 284 second-class passengers, 118 will survive. Of the 325 first-class passengers, 201 will survive. The numbers say everything about the night's logic that needs to be said. Another boat goes. Another. You move to the starboard side of the boat deck and watch the loading of the forward boats. Number 9 goes with 56 people. Number 11 goes. Number 13 is being prepared. The officers are working steadily, without visible panic, with the quiet efficiency of men executing a plan, though the plan has the quality of something being improvised under conditions for which no plan was quite prepared. Somewhere in the forward section of the first-class deck, the ship's band has assembled. They began in the first-class lounge. 8 musicians, contracted not by White Star but by the Liverpool agency of CW and FN Black, who placed musicians on virtually every major British liner. They are playing ragtime. The music comes to you on the second-class deck as something heard from a distance, not clearly, not as distinct melody, but as a sound that is recognizably music and therefore recognizably human, in the middle of all of this. The band leader is Wallace Hartley, a 33-year-old violinist from Lancashire. The other 7 musicians are of various nationalities, French, Belgian, British. None of them are under any obligation to be playing. None of them are crew members in the operational sense. They are playing because someone asked them to, and because they are musicians, and because this is what musicians do when there is nothing else to do, and someone needs to hear something human. None of them will survive. You know some of the faces at the rail around you. The Reverend Harper is here, the Baptist minister, the one who argued theology in the library on Friday evening, who sang with his full voice in the Sunday service this morning. He has sent his daughter and sister-in-law to the boats. You do not know when they left. He is here among the men, walking the deck with a purposefulness that is not quite agitation and not quite calm. He is speaking to people. He is asking them questions. Later, survivors will report that he went through the crowd on the boat deck asking people whether they were saved, in the evangelical sense, not saved from the ship, but saved in the soul. You do not speak to him tonight. You stand in the angle between boats 13 and 15 and watch the crew work. The noise of the steam above is relentless. The cold is relentless. The deck has continued to tilt, forward now by perhaps 5 degrees, which is enough to feel clearly underfoot, enough to give the whole surface of the ship a slightly wrong quality, as though the geometry of the world has been shifted by a small but decisive amount. People are clustering toward the stern, away from the bow, because the stern end of the deck is still higher, still closer to level. Boat 13 is being loaded. The loading process is strange to watch. An officer oversees it. Women are handed in, helped over the rail, lowered by the hands of crew, received by the crew already in the boat. Children are passed. The boat fills, slowly, with the particular slowness of a thing that has no precedent, for which no one has been trained. which everyone is doing for the first and only time. There comes a moment. You will remember this moment when an officer looks at you. He looks at the women around you. He looks back at the boat, which has room. He looks at you again. There are no more women visible in your immediate vicinity. The officer says, "You there, can you get in?" You look at the boat. You look at the water 90 feet below. You look at the officer. You climb over the rail and drop into lifeboat 13. The time is approximately 1:25 in the morning. You have been on the deck for more than an hour. The ship's bow is noticeably lower than her stern. In the forward areas of the ship, the water has reached E-deck. The mail room is completely submerged. The squash court is submerged. Boiler room 6 is flooded. The lifeboat holds 64 people, including you. You are one of very few men. The davit ropes begin to pay out. The boat drops. Not all at once, not a fall, nothing dramatic, but the ropes begin to move through the davit pulleys with a sound of running rope and iron, and the wooden hull of the lifeboat descends the side of the Titanic 1 foot at a time. The ship's side is a wall beside you, iron plates painted black, studded with rivet heads at regular intervals, the marks of the Belfast shipyard where 3,000 men worked for 26 months to build this ship. You can put your hand out and touch the hull as you descend. The metal is cold. It is the same temperature as the water you are descending toward. The rivet heads pass at eye level, one by one. Each one is a piece of the ship's structure. The Titanic's hull was fastened with approximately 3 million rivets, wrought iron at the bow and stern, steel amidships. The rivets at the bow, where the iceberg struck, were of a type slightly more brittle than the central hull rivets, an economy made during construction, a small decision made in 1910 in the Harland and Wolff shipyard. That is partly why the hull opened along its seams rather than bending, why 5 compartments flooded instead of 2, why you are in this lifeboat at all. You do not know this. No one knows this in 1912. It will not be understood until 1986. You descend past the rows of lit portholes. Through each one, a circle of light, perhaps 18 inches across. You can see the interior of the ship, a corridor, a stateroom, the edge of a table, a lamp burning. The ship is still lit throughout. The generators are still running, fed by the engineers who will remain at their posts until the water reaches them. The engineers have been ordered to stay at their posts to keep the pumps running and the lights burning for as long as possible. None of them will survive. There are 64 people in this boat. You are seated amidships, the middle section, on the wooden thwart, pressed close to the people on either side of you. Most of the passengers in the boat are women. There are a handful of men, almost all of them crew members assigned to handle the oars. The boat smells of new wood and rope and salt and the particular metallic cold of ocean air. The descent takes several minutes. Halfway down the ship's side, something goes wrong. The forward davit rope is paying out faster than the aft rope, so the bow of the lifeboat has dropped below the level of the stern. The boat is hanging at an angle, bow down, and the people forward are gripping the thwarts and the gunwales to keep from sliding. Then the forward rope catches up and levels, and then it slows, and the boat hangs level again, the ropes trembling with the weight, and the black hull of the Titanic is still beside you, going up forever. You look down. The water is closer than you expected. The ocean here, at the surface, has a slight iridescent quality in the starlight. Not blue or green exactly, but a darkness with a faint sheen to it, perfectly flat. You are perhaps 20 feet above it now. You can see, by looking forward along the hull, that the Titanic's bow is already much lower in the water than her stern. The ship is visibly deeper at the front than she was an hour ago, and this is visible even from this angle. Even in this light, she is going down at the head. The boat is almost to the water. And then, and you will write about this in detail 9 weeks from now, sitting in a room in Boston, trying to get the words to carry the exact quality of those seconds, someone shouts from above. You look up. Lifeboat 15 is being lowered on the same set of davits directly above you. Boat 15 is a full-sized lifeboat, 65 persons capacity, and it is descending at its own rate from the boat deck above. Boat 13, which has been delayed by the rope irregularity and by the difficulty of navigation, has not cleared far enough outward from the ship's side. 15 is coming straight down on top of you. The people in the boat shout. The crew in the boat shout. The crew above, who are lowering 15, cannot hear the shouts over the steam noise. The gap between the two boats closes, 10 feet, 8 feet, 5. The oarsmen in 13 are pushing against the ship's hull with their oars, trying to move the boat laterally, out from under the descending weight above. There is a bilge discharge, a pipe in the Titanic's hull, pumping water from the ship's interior into the ocean, directly beside Boat 13. The pump is running, and the discharge is pouring into the lifeboat, which is receiving several inches of water through this pipe, which further complicates the oarsman's attempt to maneuver. The boat is low, wet, crowded, and 40 tons of loaded lifeboat are descending onto it from 6 feet above. A stoker in the bow of Boat 13, a man named Frederick Barrett, leading stoker of Boiler Room 6, reaches up with his knife and cuts the forward davit rope. The bow of the boat swings out and down, away from the ship's side, and Boat 15 passes the space where you were just sitting and hits the water alongside you with a flat, hard sound. The gap between the two boats is approximately 2 feet. You are on the water. The rope problem is not yet resolved. Boat 13 is still attached to the davit ropes and is being pulled backward toward the Titanic's side by the tension in the lines. The stoker cuts the second rope. The boat drifts free. An oarsman ships his oar, then another. Then the 4 oarsmen begin to row, and the boat moves away from the Titanic's side into the open water of the North Atlantic. You look back. The Titanic is enormous in the darkness. She is lit along her entire length. Every porthole lit, every deck lamp burning, a long bright line of light on the water that extends from where you can see her bow, which is already lower than she should be, to her stern, which is still at the height you remember from the deck. She looks, and this is the phrase you will use, like a city on the water, a city that is moving very slowly and deliberately into the sea. The oarsmen row. The Titanic's light recedes. You are perhaps 300 or 400 yards from the ship when you hear the sound. It is the sound of the steam coming to an end. The venting that has been continuous since shortly after the collision. The roar that made conversation impossible on the boat deck. The noise of the pressure relief valves releasing steam from the overloaded boilers has been present as a background constant throughout the evacuation. It has masked other sounds. It has covered voices and the noise of the davits and the particular sounds of people under extreme stress trying to stay composed. And now it is stopping, slowly, the pressure dropping as the water rising in the ship reaches the furnaces and extinguishes them one by one. And in the silence that comes into the space where the steam was, you hear the ship. You hear, at this distance, what the steam had been covering, the sound of a large structure under stress. It is not a single sound, but a combination. The long, low groan of metal working against metal, the crack of something giving way in the hull, the particular harmonic of an enormous enclosed space filling with water. It is not a frightening sound, exactly. It is a sound that is too large and too strange for the ordinary categories of frightening. It is simply a sound you have never heard before and will never hear again. The sound of the largest ship in the world beginning to die. The people in the boat are quiet. You sit on the wooden thwart and look at the Titanic and listen. The temperature of the air is at the freezing point. You cannot feel your hands clearly, not because they are numb exactly, but because the cold has reduced them to a kind of abstraction, a knowledge that they are there rather than a physical sensation of them. Your coat is wool, which holds heat even when damp, and you are not wet. You are colder than you have been since you can remember, but you are not in danger from the cold, not yet, because you are above the water. The water temperature is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. This is below the freezing point of fresh water. Salt water has a lower freezing point than fresh water, approximately 28.4 degrees, which is why this water is still liquid. If you were to fall in, or if the lifeboat were to capsize, you would not have long. The physics of cold water immersion are not complicated. The body loses heat to water approximately 25 times faster than it loses heat to air at the same temperature. In water at 28 degrees Fahrenheit, the violent muscular contractions of cold shock would begin within seconds. Useful movement of the limbs would be gone within 3 to 5 minutes. Unconsciousness would follow within 15 to 30 minutes. You know this in the broad outlines. You do not need to calculate it precisely. The Titanic's bow is clearly lower now. From where you sit in the boat, 300 or 400 yards out, you can see the angle. Her forward funnel, the first one, is distinctly lower than the fourth funnel at the stern. The lights along her hull are not horizontal anymore. They slope. The people in the boat do not speak much. One woman near you is reciting something in a low voice. You think it may be a psalm, though you cannot hear the words clearly. A child is asleep on the bottom boards of the boat, under someone's coat, its face invisible. One of the crew is pulling at the oars with slow, steady strokes, keeping the boat at distance, watching the ship over his shoulder. A man at the stern has one hand on the tiller. No one is crying. No one is hysterical. This is not courage, exactly. You will think about this later, about what it was, this quality of stillness in the boat, this absence of the behavior that extreme fear is supposed to produce. Part of it is the cold. The cold is so total and so present that it occupies the body's full attention, leaving little room for the expressions of fear. Part of it is the dark. The dark and the stillness of the ocean create a dreamlike quality that the mind has difficulty bridging to the category of reality, the category in which disaster and death and the necessary responses to them are available. Part of it is that no one in this boat has ever done this before. There is no established behavior for this situation, so people sit. The time passes. You do not have a watch, or if you do, you cannot read it in this light. So time exists only as duration, as the accumulation of cold minutes, one against the next, each identical to the last. each containing the same stars and the same still water and the same sloping ship. By 2 in the morning, the Titanic's bow is so far under that her forecastle, the raised deck at the very tip of her bow, is underwater. The angle of her hull is now clearly visible even at this distance. Roughly 15 degrees, enough that the light from her portholes, which were horizontal windows in a vertical wall, now shows at an angle. Her forward funnel is low against the horizon. People in the boat are pointing. You watch without pointing. At approximately 2:18 in the morning, the lights of the Titanic go out. They do not go out gradually or one by one. They go out almost simultaneously, a single extinction, though some survivors will say they blinked once before going dark, and others will say they simply ceased. And then the ship is dark against the dark sky and the dark water, visible only as a shape, a long black shape with stars above it and nothing below. And the shape is moving, the bow going under and the stern coming up, and the ship is breaking. You hear it before you see it clearly. The sound of the Titanic breaking in two is a sound that travels across the water to where you sit and arrives in the boat as a deep structural tearing, not an explosion, not a crack, but something more fundamental, a sound in the register below ordinary sound that you feel as much as hear, that speaks to something in the body that knows the difference between ordinary loud things and the sound of something that should not be able to end. Ending. The ship breaks, the bow half goes under. The stern half, freed of the weight of the bow, rises back, rises almost to vertical, a black tower of steel against the stars, her propellers clear of the water, her lights gone, her funnels gone, and then it too begins to go down. It takes approximately 2 minutes for the stern to sink from the moment it rises. Then it is gone. Then there is nothing where the ship was. And then the sound begins. The sound that comes across the water in the minutes after the Titanic sinks is the sound of more than 1,500 human beings in the ocean. It carries across the flat, still water with a clarity that the cold amplifies. Voices not screaming exactly, but calling. A collective sound that has no single identity, but is made of hundreds of individual ones, each of them complete in itself, each of them a person who was on the ship 20 minutes ago and is now in water that is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The people in your lifeboat hear it. No one speaks. Several people cover their ears. You do not. You listen. You are a scientist. You have always believed that the only response to the truth is to look at it. This is the truth at 2:20 in the morning on the 15th of April, 1912. The largest ship in the world has sunk on her maiden voyage, and more than 1,500 people are in water that will kill them within minutes. And you are sitting in a wooden boat 300 yards away, with your hands in your lap and your book in your coat pocket. The people in the water are dying in a specific sequence that is determined by physiology rather than will. The water at 28 degrees Fahrenheit causes what is now understood as cold shock, an involuntary inhalation response that causes the victim to gasp and, if their face is in the water, inhale water. This happens in the first 30 seconds. It causes cardiac stress in those with any weakness in their cardiovascular systems. Those who survive the first 30 seconds then face a rapid loss of muscular control. The cold incapacitates the muscles of the arms and legs within 3 to 5 minutes, making swimming impossible. A life belt keeps a person's face above water, but a person who cannot move their arms, cannot maneuver, cannot stay warm through movement, cannot do anything but wait. Unconsciousness follows within 15 to 30 minutes in water of this temperature. Death follows unconsciousness. In 1,500 people, this process takes approximately 20 minutes from start to finish. The officer in charge of the boat, you do not know his name, you may never learn it, says something to the oarsmen. The oarsmen do not row toward the voices. The officer says again, they do not go back. This decision, the decision that most of the lifeboats make that night, to not go back into the field of people in the water, is not made from cruelty. It is made from a fear that is not unreasonable, the fear that a swamped lifeboat, overloaded with desperate people, will capsize and kill everyone in it, including those already saved. This fear is not irrational. A lifeboat capsized would leave 64 people in 28-degree water. The mathematics of this is straightforward. But the voices carry across the water, and the mathematics of that is also straightforward. And you sit in the boat and listen as the voices, over the space of perhaps 20 minutes, become fewer and quieter as the cold does what the cold does with absolute and impersonal efficiency. By 2:40, the voices have nearly stopped. The silence that follows is the most complete silence you have ever experienced. No engines, no wind, no waves, no voices, only the water and the cold and the stars and 63 other people breathing in the dark. You sit in the silence. Somewhere in the darkness, perhaps a mile away, Boat 14, commanded by 5th Officer Harold Lowe, the only officer in any boat who went back, is rowing toward where the Titanic was. Lowe has transferred his passengers into other boats to make room. He rows into the field of wreckage and the floating bodies and the few people who are still alive, and he pulls them into the boat. He saves a handful, perhaps a dozen, of the 1,500 who entered the water. Lowe's boat saves perhaps 13. You do not know this is happening. You sit in the dark and wait. The cold has taken your hands now. Not pain exactly, but a kind of remoteness, as though your hands belong to someone else and you are merely observing them. You tuck them under your arms. Your feet are cold through your shoes. Your face is cold. The cold of the air is less than the cold of the water would be, but over hours it accumulates, settling into the body through every surface exposed to it. The stars turn above you. They are very beautiful. You have never seen stars like this. Not in London, not in Cambridge, not from any window or any hill you have ever stood on. The darkness out here is total in a way that land never achieves, because land always has some light somewhere, some distant glow of habitation, some reminder that human beings are present on the earth. Out here there is nothing, only the stars and the cold and the water and the boat. You think about your son Alec. He is 8 years old, being cared for at home while you travel. You think about him in a brief, specific way, his face, the way he holds his pencil when he writes, and then you put the thought away because there is nothing useful in it at this moment, and usefulness is what is required. You think about the mathematics. Of the 2,208 people on the Titanic, approximately 20 lifeboat loads have left the ship. The boats were not all full. If you average the loading at perhaps 50 persons per boat, that is roughly 1,000 people saved. The ship carried 2,208. The arithmetic leaves approximately 1,200 people unaccounted for. You do not complete this arithmetic. You know where it ends. The Reverend Harper, you find out later, did not get into a lifeboat. He gave his life jacket to a man who had none. He was seen in the water, calling to people on wreckage, asking them the same question he had been asking on the deck. He was eventually pulled onto an overturned collapsible boat and died of exposure. He was 39 years old. His daughter Nana survived. She was 6. She was saved in one of the last boats. At approximately 3:30 in the morning, a light appears on the eastern horizon. A rocket, a distress rocket fired from the RMS Carpathia, the Cunard liner that has been steaming toward the Titanic's last known position since 1220, when her operator came on duty, found the distress signal in the air and woke Captain Arthur Rostron to tell him. Captain Rostron, at 12:20, was 60 miles away. He ordered full speed. The Carpathia's normal service speed is 14 knots. That night, Rostron drove her at 17, above her rated maximum, through ice, through the dark, with every spare stoker pulled up to feed the furnaces, and every spare blanket laid out in the dining saloons for the survivors he hoped to find. He posted extra lookouts to watch for ice. He turned off the heating in the passengers' cabins and redirected the steam to the engines. He prepared his doctors, his stewards, his cooks. He threaded the Carpathia through the same ice field that sank the Titanic. At 4 o'clock in the morning, in the dark, guided by the stars and his officers' navigation and the distress rockets that the lifeboats were still sending up. He was 60 miles away, and he got there in 3 hours and 50 minutes. The rocket goes up in the east. The people in the boats see it. Someone in the bow of your boat says quietly, "There she is." The oarsmen begin to row toward the light. The time is approximately 3:45 in the morning. Around you on the flat, dark ocean, the other lifeboats are also turning toward the light, scattered across a mile of water, separated in the dark. Each one a small wooden shell with its cargo of survivors, each one rowing toward the same point on the eastern horizon where the Carpathia's rockets are still going up, one every few minutes, each one a signal that someone is coming. You row. The cold is absolute. The stars are absolute. The water is flat and dark and absolutely still. You have your book in your coat pocket. You are alive. The Carpathia comes to a stop in the dark. Her engines go quiet, not the abrupt silence of the Titanic's engines 2 hours ago, but a deliberate slowing, a controlled reduction that ends in stillness. The ship sits in the water with her lights on and a rope ladder hanging over her port side, and the lifeboats come to her one by one out of the dark. Your oarsmen row toward her. As you approach, the Carpathia grows from a point of light into a ship, smaller than the Titanic by a very great measure. She is 558 feet long, 13,500 tons. You have been living on a ship that is 882 feet long and 46,000 tons, and the Carpathia, by any ordinary measure a large ocean-going vessel, looks from the lifeboat like something you might be able to comprehend, something human-scaled, something solid in the dark water. The first lifeboat reached the Carpathia at 4:10 in the morning. It is now approximately 4:30, and the operation of bringing the survivors aboard is well underway. The process is not simple. The Carpathia's entry port, the lowest doorway in her hull, opened at the waterline, is where survivors are brought in. Those who can climb do so on rope ladders hung from the side. Those who cannot, children, the elderly, the injured, anyone too cold or too exhausted to grip a rope, are brought up in canvas bags, in boatswain's chairs, in net slings, hauled by the crew above. 3 of the Carpathia's doctors are stationed throughout the ship. The dining rooms have been converted into receiving areas. The ship's own passengers, 700 of them, tourists and emigrants, roused from their cabins by the cold and the noise of preparation, are giving up their berths, their blankets, their clothing. Your boat comes alongside. You take the rope ladder in both hands. Your hands have been cold for 2.5 hours, and the grip is imprecise, the fingers not quite responding the way you expect them to. You climb anyway. You are a reasonably fit man of 34, and the cold has not taken that from you. You go up the side of the Carpathia 1 rung at a time, and hands reach down and take your coat and pull you over the rail onto the deck. Not everyone can climb. The children in the boat, and there are several, are placed into canvas bags and hoisted up by the crew above, the bags swinging against the ship's side in the cold air, small faces visible at the opening, too cold or too stunned to cry. Elderly passengers are winched up in makeshift chairs, boatswain's chairs fashioned from rope, the person sitting in the loop, held by their own weight and the crew's grip above. This is the improvised machinery of rescue on a ship that was not built for this purpose and is doing it anyway with what it has. You are on a ship. The deck beneath your feet is warm in a way the lifeboat was not. The Carpathia's deck is not heated exactly. It is simply the deck of a ship that has been running at full power, and the machinery below has pushed heat through the hull in the way that working machinery always does. After the lifeboat, after the 2.5 hours of Atlantic air at the freezing point, the comparative warmth of the Carpathia's deck is the most physical sensation you have felt since the collision. A steward hands you a blanket. Another hands you a cup of something hot. Brandy, you think, though it might be hot soup, and you do not particularly care which. You drink it. The heat of it moves down through your chest in a way that you feel distinctly, a warmth spreading through a body that has been very cold for a long time. You look around. The Carpathia's deck is crowded. Survivors from the earlier lifeboats are here, standing, sitting, wrapped in blankets, some being attended to by the ship's doctors, some simply standing and looking out at the dark water where the Titanic was. There are perhaps 200 people visible on this deck alone. The faces you can see in the lamplight are, the only honest word is contained. Not calm exactly, because the eyes are wrong for calm. But the external behavior is controlled, quiet. The bodies held in a posture that suggests something is being managed internally that is not visible on the surface. Women are looking for their husbands. You see this from the moment you arrive. Women moving through the crowd on deck with a focused, methodical urgency, looking at each face, asking the crew questions, showing the crew names written on small pieces of paper or said aloud in voices that are careful and clear and entirely controlled. They are looking for the men they were separated from on the boat deck of the Titanic, the men who stood back, the men who said, "Go, go, I will be in the next boat." Many of these women have been in their lifeboats for 2 hours, watching the Titanic sink, listening to the sound of the people in the water, waiting. They have been waiting to find that their husbands are here. Some of them find the faces they are looking for. Most do not. The last lifeboat is brought alongside the Carpathia at approximately 8:30 in the morning. The final person to board is Second Officer Charles Littler. the senior surviving officer of the Titanic, who spent the final minutes of the sinking standing on the roof of the officers' quarters, who was pulled underwater when the forward funnel collapsed and surfaced near the overturned collapsible boat B, who spent the hours from 2:20 until 8:30 clinging to the keel of the upturned boat with 30 other men in the water, keeping the boat balanced by shifting weight in response to the swells, while the Carpathia's rockets went up in the east and the sky lightened around them. He climbs up the rope ladder and onto the Carpathia's deck and stands there for a moment. Then he asks where the captain is and goes to find him. By 8:30, the rescue operation is complete. The Carpathia has taken on 705 survivors. 3 people died in the lifeboats and were buried at sea that afternoon. One of the Carpathia's own passengers died en route to New York of unrelated causes. The total number of survivors from the Titanic who will arrive in New York is 705. The total number of people who boarded the Titanic at Southampton, Cherbourg, and Queenstown is 2,208. Captain Rostron makes a slow circuit of the wreck site before turning southwestward for New York. He is looking for any remaining survivors. There are none. What there is, visible in the pale morning light, is the field of wreckage, the debris of a ship that was the largest in the world 12 hours ago. Deck chairs, life preservers, cork from the lining of the watertight compartments, fragments of wood paneling, a carved door, a child's shoe, and among all of this, floating in the life jackets that kept them on the surface through the night, the bodies. From the Carpathia's deck, you can see them. They are face up in the water, mostly, held by the cork-filled life jackets that were issued to every cabin on the ship. They are scattered across several miles of ocean, interspersed with the debris. Most are still wearing their cabin clothes, the clothes they dressed in hurriedly when the stewards knocked on the doors at midnight. Most are in the white canvas life jackets with the bold black letters Titanic on the back. The Carpathia's second officer, James Bissett, watching from the bridge as the ship made its circuit, later said he hoped never to see such a sight again. Captain Rostron counted the icebergs visible from his bridge as the light grew, 25 over 200 feet high, and dozens more between 50 and 150 feet. The same ice field that was invisible in the dark is now a landscape. The ice the Titanic's lookouts could not see is everywhere in the morning light, white towers and ridges on a flat gray sea, the Carpathia threading carefully among them, the crew silent at their stations. The iceberg itself is still visible. It has not moved far since the collision. The night was calm and the current is slow, and in the morning light it is exactly what it always was, a mass of glacier ice calved from one of Greenland's ice sheets perhaps 2 years ago, carried south on the Labrador Current at the rate of a few miles per day, shaped by melt and weather into the form it has now. It is approximately 100 feet above the waterline. This is its visible portion. 90% of an iceberg is below the waterline, which means this one extends approximately 900 feet downward into the cold water beneath. It is the oldest thing within sight. In the morning light, on its waterline on one side, there is a streak of red paint. You turn away from the rail. The 3 days to New York are unlike anything you have experienced. The Carpathia is a modest vessel, comfortable for its class, which is the tourist and emigrant trade, but not built for the comfort of more than 700 extra passengers on top of its existing complement. The survivors are distributed through every available space: the dining rooms, the public lounges, the officers' quarters, the cabins of Carpathia's own passengers who have given them up. Some sleep on the floor of the corridors. Some sit in the deck chairs all night rather than go below. The Carpathia's own passengers, largely American tourists returning from the Mediterranean and emigrants from Central Europe, respond with a generosity that is complete and practical and unmediated by ceremony. They give their clothes, their money, their food, their berths. A woman whose name you do not know spends the entire voyage distributing blankets in the corridors. A man whose name you also do not know sets up an improvised station near the first-class lounge where he dispenses hot beef broth continuously for 12 hours without stopping. The wireless room is overwhelmed. The Titanic's junior wireless operator, Harold Bride, is brought aboard with frostbite in both feet. He spent the final hours of the sinking helping Phillips with the distress calls, then clinging to the overturned collapsible B. He is placed in a chair in the Carpathia's wireless room and works from that chair, transmitting the names of the survivors to the shore for as long as he can. The volume of messages is extraordinary. Newspapers, families, governments, the White Star Line, the American Senate, all wanting information simultaneously. Rostron has ordered that no press messages are to be transmitted, only survivor names and official communications. The press, in their tugboats outside New York Harbor, will be furious. You spend much of the first day writing. You find paper in the Carpathia's library, the library of a much smaller ship than the one you left, with a simpler selection of books and no piano in the corner. And you sit and write, not yet the book, but the notes for it, the sequence of what happened, the times as best you can reconstruct them, what you saw and what you heard, the quality of the silence on the deck at midnight, the sound of the steam, the way the first lifeboat looked, going down with 27 people in it, the sound the ship made when she broke. You write because you were trained to observe and record. You write because you know that if you do not do it now, the details will begin to soften and rearrange themselves into something more bearable and less exact. You write because you believe that what happened should be understood precisely, not approximately, and that someone who was there has a duty to make it as exact as possible. There are other people writing on this ship. The Titanic carried, in its second class alone, a disproportionate number of journalists, clergymen, teachers, and educated professionals, people whose first response to experience is to render it in language. They are doing what you are doing, at other tables, in the corners of lounges, on the deck with notebooks on their knees, all of them trying to put the exact shape of it down before the shape softens. At the tables in the Carpathia's dining room, the conversations are careful and specific. People ask after names. People relay what they saw. This person got into a boat. That person was seen on the boat deck after midnight. This man's wife went in the first boat. The information assembles itself slowly, imperfectly, with many gaps. The full accounting will take weeks. The final list of the dead will not be settled for months. Mrs. Clark, the woman from your second-class dining table, traveling to join her husband in the New York garment trade, you do not see on the Carpathia. You look for her face throughout the 3 days. You do not find it. You do not find the engineer from Manchester, Howard Irwin, who had been deciding whether to emigrate to Boston. The Reverend Carter is alive. You find him on the first afternoon, sitting in the Carpathia's lounge with his hands folded on his knees and his eyes open and nothing on his face that you can read clearly. You sit beside him for a while. Neither of you speaks. There is nothing to say that the silence does not already say with more accuracy than words. On the second day, a memorial service is held in the first-class lounge of the Carpathia. Captain Rostron, who is a religious man, conducts it himself. The survivors who can attend do. The hymns that are sung include Eternal Father, Strong to Save, the same hymn that was sung in the second-class dining saloon of the Titanic on Sunday morning, less than 48 hours ago, when the ship was still running at 22 knots and the sky was clear and everyone was looking forward to New York. You sing it again on the Carpathia, over the place where the Titanic is. The North Atlantic Ocean is approximately 12,000 feet deep at that position. The wreck of the Titanic lies in two pieces on the ocean floor at a depth of 12,500 feet, 2.5 miles below the surface. She went down bow first, the heavier forward section pulling the bow section at speed, impacting the ocean floor at roughly 20 to 30 miles per hour. The stern section, lighter and air-filled, fell more slowly, spiraling as it descended, and landed approximately 2,000 feet from the bow. Between the two sections, across the ocean floor, the debris field stretches for over a mile. She is perfectly preserved in the cold and the dark. There is no oxygen at that depth. Nothing rusts in the conventional sense. She is simply there, in the dark, 2.5 miles down, with the personal effects of 2,200 people still inside her. The Carpathia runs southwestward through the days. The weather, which was so perfectly clear and calm on the night of the 14th, has turned. By the afternoon of the 15th it is overcast and cold. By the 16th there are heavy thunderstorms and fog. The Carpathia moves through them at service speed, 14 knots, her original passengers still aboard and her 705 additional ones filling every available space, and New York is 3 days away. You watch the ocean from the rail when the weather allows. The sea that was a mirror 4 nights ago is rough now, proper Atlantic rough, with white-capped swells and spray at the bow, and the Carpathia's smaller hull moving through it with a motion that the Titanic, for all her 4 nights, never showed you. The Carpathia rolls and pitches in a way that is completely ordinary for a ship of her size in these conditions, and it is disorienting, this ordinariness, this unremarkable competence of a smaller ship doing what ships have always done. You think about many things in these 3 days. You do not find the Reverend Harper. You already know you will not. On the evening of the 17th, the USS Chester, an American light cruiser sent out by order of the U.S. Navy, falls in alongside the Carpathia and her signal lamp begins to flash. She wants the names of the third-class survivors. Harold Bride, still working from the wheelchair in the wireless room, transmits them. The Chester then turns and accelerates away toward New York, carrying the information ahead of the slow Carpathia. The coast of America is out there in the dark, invisible but present. You have been at sea for 12 days, 8 days on the Titanic and 3 days on the Carpathia, plus the night in between, and the land is close now. You can tell by the quality of the horizon, which is no longer the purely oceanic horizon but has a different density to it, a suggestion of something behind the dark. You go below for the last night. The cabin you have been given on the Carpathia is small and smells of someone else's life. The traveling case of the passenger who vacated it, the faint scent of their soap, the slight warmth of a body that slept here the night before you arrived. You lie in the berth and listen to the Carpathia's engines, A different sound from the Titanic's engines, higher pitched, the note of a smaller machine, and feel the familiar motion of a ship underway. New York tomorrow. The inquiry begins the day after that. Senator William Alden Smith of Michigan has already moved to authorize a full Senate investigation. He will convene it on the 19th at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York, calling survivors as witnesses before many of them have had time to change their clothes. The British Board of Trade will conduct its own inquiry beginning in May. Between the two, 25,622 questions will be asked of 96 witnesses. The recommendations that come from these inquiries will change maritime law permanently. Enough lifeboats for every person on board, 24-hour wireless watches, mandatory lifeboat drills, and international ice patrol to monitor iceberg positions in the North Atlantic. These changes will come because the Titanic sank. They will not come before. You lie in the berth on the Carpathia and think about what you will write. You have the notes, you have the sequence, you have the details you were careful to preserve before they softened. You will write the book, and it will be published in 9 weeks, and it will be described by the newspapers as the most accurate and careful account of any passenger. You will write about the calm on the deck, and the steam, and the first lifeboat with 27 people in it, and the book in your coat pocket, and the sound the ship made when she broke. You will write it plainly, without drama, in the language of a man who was trained to observe without prejudice. You are asleep before the Carpathia reaches the harbor approaches. New York is rain and dark and 10,000 people. The Carpathia enters New York Harbor on the evening of Thursday the 18th of April, 1912, in heavy rain under a low overcast. She passes the Statue of Liberty, that copper figure that has been standing on her island since 1886, green now with the oxidation of 26 years of harbor air, her torch visible in the dark through the rain. For the emigrant passengers in the Titanic's third class, or those who survived, this was the image they had been told to expect, the image associated in every account they had heard with arrival, with America, with the beginning of the thing they crossed the ocean for. You pass it on the Carpathia's deck in the rain, and think about the people who were supposed to see it on Wednesday morning, and are not here. The harbor is crowded with small craft. Tugboats, ferries, the launches of newspaper companies. The press boats have been circling outside the harbor for hours, their lights visible through the rain, their megaphones shouting questions across the water that the Carpathia's crew ignore under Rostron's orders. The deck of the Carpathia is lined with survivors, standing in the rain, watching New York come out of the dark. The photographers on the press boats have flash equipment, the magnesium powder flash that turns a dark, wet deck into a moment of white light and then returns to dark. You see the flashes from the press boats as they photograph the ship. Each flash illuminates the Carpathia for a fraction of a second. The survivors at the rail, the lifeboats stacked on the deck, the flags at half-mast, then darkness, then another flash. The Carpathia passes Pier 59 first, the White Star Line's pier, where the Titanic was supposed to dock on Wednesday morning. The crew lowers the Titanic's 13 recovered lifeboats here, returning them to their owners. The White Star Line's berth receives them. They are the only things that arrived on schedule. Then the Carpathia turns and comes to Pier 54, the Cunard Line's pier. The crowd on the pier is 10,000 people, according to the newspaper estimates. They have been waiting since late afternoon. They are the relatives and friends of the Titanic's passengers. The press, the merely curious, and the representatives of various relief organizations, the Red Cross, the Women's Relief Committee, the Travelers' Aid Society, who have been preparing for the arrival since news came through by wireless 2 days ago. 20 ambulances from Bellevue Hospital are parked at the end of East 26th Street. The gangway is lowered at 9:25 in the evening. The survivors come down. The first to disembark are the first-class passengers, a doctor and his wife, others following. As each person appears at the top of the gangway, a section of the crowd surges forward, searching for a known face. The pier becomes a series of recognitions and non-recognitions, reunions and their absence, happening simultaneously all across the dock. People who find the person they came for hold them in a way that has no analogy in ordinary arrivals. People who do not find the person they came for are taken by the relief workers and led away. You come down the gangway in the second-class group. The rain is on your face. The air smells of the harbor, salt and tar and coal smoke, and the particular smell of a large American city in the rain, which is different from London's rain smell in a way you cannot exactly define. The pier is loud, voices in many languages, some weeping, the shouts of the press, the horns of motor cars outside. After the 3 days on the Carpathia, after the quiet of the Atlantic, the noise is almost physical. Nobody is waiting for you specifically. You did not telegraph ahead. There was no one in New York who knew you were coming. Your brother is in Toronto. You gave your name to the Carpathia's purser for the survivor list, which was transmitted to the shore, and which is being distributed to the waiting families in printed sheets as people come off the gangway. Someone somewhere may read your name on that list and know that you are alive. You walk through the pier and out into the street. New York in April is cold and dark and raining. There are motor cars, many more than in London, the streets thick with them, their headlights cutting through the rain. The buildings are tall in a way that London's are not. The skyscrapers of Lower Manhattan are visible even from the pier, their upper floors lost in the low cloud, their lighted windows a vertical pattern of gold in the dark. This is the city you were coming to as a holiday destination, the city you planned to see before going north to Toronto to visit your brother. You are seeing it. You are standing in its rain and looking at its buildings, and you are here. You have your book in your coat pocket, the same book you slipped in before going up to the deck 12 days ago. You have not opened it since. The street outside the pier is crowded with people who did not find the person they came for. They are standing in the rain in small groups, or being led to motor cars by relief workers, or simply standing still with their faces doing nothing in particular. The newspaper photographers are here too, their flash powder going off every few seconds, each flash illuminating the street and the people in it for a fraction of a second. The faces of the survivors of the Titanic, arriving in New York in the rain, 4 days late and reduced to the clothes on their backs. Some of the third-class passengers are wearing opera hats and men's overcoats they have been given on the Carpathia because all their own clothing went down with the ship. One woman who comes down the gangway behind you is wearing a fur stole over a nightdress. This is not unusual tonight. The relief organizations have been handing out whatever was available. You find a hotel. It is a plain commercial hotel near the waterfront, nothing like the Grand Cunard and White Star hotels further up the island. You do not need a grand hotel. You need a room with a bed and a desk. The desk clerk recognizes from something about your appearance or your manner, what ship you came off tonight, and his expression changes, and he finds a room for you with a particular efficiency that contains something beyond the ordinary commercial transaction. You go upstairs and sit at the desk. Outside the window, New York is going about its night. The horns, the rain, the lights of the buildings, the noise of a city that has not been at sea for any of the last 12 days and cannot quite comprehend yet what the last 12 days have been. Tomorrow the newspapers will have it all. Tonight the city is still receiving the information, still assembling it from the wireless reports and the arriving survivors and the shouted questions from the press boats and the silence of the Carpathia's officers. You take out your notes and begin to write. The world has been changed by what happened, though the full change will take time to become visible. In the immediate aftermath, Senator Smith's inquiry begins in 2 days at the Waldorf Astoria. The British inquiry follows in May. The recommendations come quickly. Sufficient lifeboats for all souls aboard. Mandatory lifeboat drills before departure. 24-hour wireless watches on all passenger vessels. In 1914, the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea is signed by 13 nations, SOLAS as it becomes known, the framework of maritime safety law that still governs ocean travel today. In the same year, the International Ice Patrol is established, funded by the signatories, operating to this day, monitoring iceberg positions in the North Atlantic shipping lanes. These changes are real and permanent. They are the consequence of 1,500 people dying in 28-degree water on a flat, still, moonless April night. Every ship that crosses the North Atlantic today does so with enough lifeboats, with its wireless staffed around the clock, with ice patrol information available at any moment. But the change is larger than these regulations. The Titanic sank at the height of a particular world. It was the world of the Edwardian era, the world of vast confidence in technology and progress, in the British Empire and American industrial power, in the idea that the future would be built on the principles of the present, bigger and faster and more reliable, with engineering solving each problem as it arose. The Titanic was the expression of that confidence made physical. The largest ship, the most modern, the safest, the most elegantly arranged expression of what human beings could do when they applied wealth and knowledge and skilled labor to the problem of crossing the ocean. And it sank. Not because of some extreme natural violence, not a hurricane, not a catastrophic storm, but because on a perfectly calm, perfectly clear night, a ship moving too fast received warnings it did not properly act on and struck a piece of ice that had been drifting south from Greenland for 2 years. The watertight compartments that were supposed to make the ship unsinkable were not built high enough. The lifeboat provision that was supposed to be more than adequate was barely half of what was needed. The wireless operator who could have delivered the final warning was too busy with passengers' messages to interrupt his work. These were not extraordinary failures. They were the ordinary failures of a system that had convinced itself it was extraordinary. 2 years after the Titanic sinks, the First World War begins. The Edwardian world that built her, the world of European empires and confident progress and the assumption that civilization was advancing toward something better, is destroyed in the trenches of France and Belgium with an efficiency that makes the Titanic look like a footnote. By 1918, the old world is gone. The Carpathia herself is torpedoed by a German U-boat in July of 1918, sinking in the Celtic Sea. The era that produced both of them is over. But the Titanic remains. She is there, in the cold dark, 2.5 miles down, unchanged and unchanging, the largest thing on the floor of the Atlantic, with everything still inside her, the china, the silverware, the letters people were writing when the ship stopped moving, the personal effects of 2,200 people. The grand staircase is gone now, eaten by organisms that live in the deep dark. But the hull is there, and the engines, and the davits that the boats were launched from, and the crow's nest where Frederick Fleet stood in the cold and saw the iceberg and rang the bell and picked up the telephone. She was found in September of 1985, 73 years later, by an expedition using underwater cameras. The bow section was found first, then the debris field, stretching across a mile of ocean floor. Then the stern. The same position, exactly where the arithmetic said she would be. You did not know any of this would happen as you write at the desk in New York on the evening of April 18, 1912. You know only what you saw. You write down what you saw. The inquiry will call you as a witness. You will testify clearly and carefully as you were trained to observe. You will describe what you saw on the deck at midnight, the calm, the steam, the first lifeboat with 27 people. You will describe the sound the ship made when she broke. The senators will ask you questions and you will answer them. And then 9 weeks after tonight, the book will be finished and published. It will be called The Loss of the SS Titanic. It will be reviewed in every major newspaper in England and America. The Guardian will call it the best first-hand account of a passenger's experiences. The Times will call it intensely moving and convincing. You write through the night at the desk in the hotel room in New York, the rain against the window and the city outside still assembling the information of what happened. And by the time the sky lightens over the East River and New York begins its morning, you have most of the sequence correct. You are 34 years old. You have a son in England. You have a brother in Toronto who does not know yet that you are alive. You were a science teacher, and then you resigned and took a holiday, and the holiday included a crossing on the Titanic. You will never entirely leave the Titanic. None of the survivors will. The inquiry will call you as a witness. You will testify clearly and carefully, as you were trained to observe. You will describe what you saw on the deck at midnight. The calm, the steam, the first lifeboat with 27 people. You will describe Boat 13 and Boat 15. The senators will ask you questions and you will answer them, and your answers will be entered into the congressional record and will form part of the foundation of the new maritime law. And then, 9 weeks after tonight, the book will be finished and published. It will be called The Loss of the SS Titanic. The Guardian will call it the best first-hand account of a passenger's experience. The Times will call it intensely moving and convincing. The Daily Mail will say it is the clearest account given by any survivor. You will go on to live a long and quiet life as a teacher, and later a school principal. In 1957, at the age of 79, you will still be teaching as principal of a school in Middlesex. In 1958, during the filming of A Night to Remember, the film about the Titanic that becomes one of the most celebrated depictions of the disaster, you will appear on set during the sinking sequence, hoping, at the age of 80, to finally go down with the ship in the way you did not go down in 1912. The director will notice you and have you removed. You will die in 1967 at the age of 89. Your memoir will still be in print. Of the other people whose names appear in this story, Captain Rostron will be knighted by King George V and will receive the Congressional Gold Medal from President Taft. He will go on to captain the Mauretania. He will die in 1940 at the age of 71 and will be buried at sea at his own request. Harold Bride, the junior wireless operator who worked through the night in the Carpathia's wireless room with frostbitten feet, will recover. He will work as a wireless operator for several more years and then quietly leave the profession and work in commerce until his death in 1956. He will rarely speak publicly about the Titanic. Jack Phillips, the senior wireless operator who sent distress calls until the last possible moment and was last seen clinging to the overturned collapsible B, will not be found. He was 25 years old. Frederick Barrett, the stoker who cut the ropes of Boat 13 with his knife, will survive. He will testify at both inquiries. He will go back to sea. He will work as a fireman and stoker until 1922 and then retire. He will die in 1931. Second Officer Lightoller, the last man to board the Carpathia, will go on to serve in the First World War, commanding a destroyer. In 1940, at the age of 66, he will take his private yacht across the English Channel to Dunkirk and help evacuate soldiers from the beach. He will bring 130 men back to England on a boat designed to carry 21. The people who did not survive are buried where they are, some in the sea, some in the cemeteries of Halifax, Nova Scotia, where 3 ships went out in April and May of 1912 to recover bodies from the North Atlantic and returned with 328 of them. The graves in Fairview Lawn Cemetery in Halifax are arranged in a curved pattern that echoes the shape of a ship's hull. Many of the headstones carry only a number, the recovery number assigned when the body was lifted from the water, because the person could not be identified. The last body to be recovered was found in late May of 1912, 6 weeks after the sinking, 500 miles from where the ship went down. It was a ship's steward named James McGrady. The sea had carried him that far. 705 people crossed this ocean and arrived in a city in the rain, carrying nothing, most of them, except what they had on, and each of them carried with them for the rest of their lives a particular night, a flat, still, starlit night on the North Atlantic. The sound of the steam, the slope of the deck, the darkness where the ship used to be, the voices in the water going quiet. You close your notebook. Outside the hotel window, New York is fully light now, the skyscrapers visible in the gray April morning, the streets below busy with the beginning of a day that has no knowledge of what you carry. The city is large and indifferent and alive, and you are in it and you are alive, and the ship is 2.5 miles down in the cold dark of the Atlantic, and the world has already begun the long work of understanding what that means. You put down your pen. The rain has stopped. There is nothing more to write tonight. There is only the morning and the city and the knowledge that you are here, which is a thing that requires no description and no record and no further proof. You were on the Titanic. You came to shore. Sleep now. The rest of the story belongs to all of us. Sleep well.